I'll call the April meeting of the Deschutes Public Library Board to order. Welcome, everybody. Kind of a small crew today, but unfortunately Bunny is unable to attend because her husband had knee replacement surgery. And it was supposed to be yesterday and the surgery got rescheduled, so she wasn't able to attend. She may try to call in or Zoom in later, depending on how everything is unfolding as far as what she needs to be present. So that's where she is today. So did people have a chance to review the minutes to
Yes.
meeting?
Yes.
Any additions or corrections? I'd entertain a motion.
Also move.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor of approving the March board meeting minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. At this point, we'd like to welcome comments from the public, if there are any members of the public that are present, either online or physically.
That's what happens with the owl.
Yeah.
It changed the view.
Okay. Hearing none, we will close the public comment section of the meeting. Okay, we have a pretty full agenda today. We have a lot of things and Greg is gonna get.
This is not hard enough. I'm good. You good? Do you want pizza or do you want a sandwich?
Pizza. All right. Okay, we're in the bond update section and Greg has a lot of items for our consideration. So
Yeah.
you geared up? Did you have a brownie?
Geared up,
Greg?
ready to go.
Right. Good.
Talked about it. For the last couple of months, we've been doing a lot of cost estimates and budgets. It's truly been a full review of the entire bond program.
Mhm.
And so a lot to share with you today. I have to say positive news, right? How we're doing it, where we're going. From a schedule standpoint, no changes to our master development schedule, so that continues to track as is. Last time we issued an update was in December. We continue to evaluate that. One of the bigger elements of evaluation that we're doing right now is Sisters and Lapine. So we are, deep into construction on that. They're fast moving projects. And so we're right at about the 50% way. And so we're doing a big check-in this month on the schedule with Southern West Builders, our CMPC, with our FF&E package, our millwork package for the FF&E, and our early learning. Some of the things that we'll talk about in detail. All of those are in motion and moving towards our openings in August. And so that's been one of the things we'll really be studying. We'll probably talk about it more in June, maybe in May, just depending. It's really a check-in to see. One of the things we really want to do, we took some lessons learned from staff and EPL. We did shutdowns and the move outs and set up all the temporary facilities. How did that work? How did that pros and cons? What did staff think of that? Because it affected staff immensely. How they shut down the library, how they set up the temporaries and got reworking. Well, we're doing it now in reverse. We're shutting down temporaries, opening new. So we're putting thousands of books back into a library and getting it ready for, the public, the consumers to come in, and shutting down Sun River. So we actually have more to do in that month of August. So we're really going to take a critical evaluation of, did we stagger it enough to not overload staff and our consultants, our contractors, and make sure that we have a good flow of that. So that'll be coming up. That's the main thing that I really see on schedule. The Redmond schedule is moving right along. You know, as we put together final GMP amendment on Redmond, Kirby updated their construction schedule, still finishing on time. Got more detail into their construction schedule of how we're going to do some things as we bought out more of the subtrades and a much higher confidence level in them. And one of the big things that we have is the ELT, which is dowel laminated timbers, and that's the floor system that we're using. And it's there's not a lot of providers of that system, and our provider is based out of Canada here, and they were actually able to secure us a little earlier fabrication point in their overall production schedule. So it took a little pressure off us. It's really given us more time to do all of our finish work, and which is really important, because sometimes you can stack a lot of guys on top and get it done, but it's nice to have a little bit more spread out with appropriate time to really do the detailed work, and not so that we end up with finished product that we want. So very happy with how that schedule has worked out. The Stevens Ranch, as we did our schematic design estimate, and we got an updated schedule from Kirby on that. Still in alignment with our master development schedule. They're comfortable with the overall duration that we're planning for and how we phase in our permits throughout that project. When we start grading, when we start building foundation system, when we start the final building components, and it's just the way we've sequenced our permitting process. So all of those are really comfortable. Our Sun River project, that's in plan check, that's tracking to this. Very much not on our critical path, because we'll have a permit waiting for Sisters of Lapine to finish. But it is nice to be done with it. Have it in our pocket, ready to go. And so we should actually see that permit probably like by late June or July, 2 months, and we start working September. So we get 2 months before we need it. So overall schedule, like I said, all the projects are progressing well. The design on Stevens Ranch is progressing for the schedule. So those are all key indicators for me that I look at is, hey, how are we doing? You know, all the little steps to make sure the big picture is being maintained. So very happy with that. Updated the dates. There really was no change to the table there for start and finish dates. So the budget, and I tried to really lay out what we saw in the budget. And like I said, we literally look at every individual part of the total bond program with a lot of cost estimates. Just kind of summarize some of those. So with Sisters and Lapine, we're partway into our construction. We really went through a deep dive with Sunwest Builders on their GMP. Okay, have you been? They finished most of their buyouts of actually awarding subcontracts, getting them on board. We had a number of allowances. And once they did the demo, they figure out, okay, exactly what do we have to rebuild in there. And so they really went through and scrubbed all that. In the end, both GMPs are very sound. We got good contingency still in their GMPs. And on our door and hardware package, we recognize 2 sizable credits coming back to us on those, because it was just understanding the exact scope of work that was required. And once they really dived into it with their subcontractors, they realized their subs were bidding way too much. And so we went through it, got it clarified, came in, and it was probably close to $140,000, $150,000 between the 2 of them credited back to us because of the savings. And so that part is going along. You know, we have our normal changes that you have in a remodel and those, but they're staying, and for the most part, Sunwest has been able to absorb them out of our contingency within the GMP. So the only change orders we have to date with them is 2 credits, 1 on each. And so that's progressing. I still am carrying the full owner's contingency, you know, for the project, because you never know when there's going to be a surprise. And, but, so was very happy with that.
How much was the back?
Pardon?
How much was the credit back?
It's about 100, between 140 and 150. Now, as we went through Sun River cost estimates, so Sunwest had put together a cost estimate for us based on 50% CDs, and then they updated it to 95% CDs, which is the set that we submitted into the city, and then the 100%, which caught up all the loose ends. So they've been tracking that, as well as our cost to build, set up, and operate the temporary trailer facility. So we're going to move the sisters facility over to Sun River, and that way we set it up and operate it like that. And so as they've gone through that, we did have some uptick on that cost estimate, just as far as the actual costs, and it has to do with just how we finalize some of this stuff we're doing on the interior and some of the structural. How at the community room, you know, we've got the big glass operable wall between the community room, and the structure above it is a glass partition because of the way that the structure is built. That, and then our mechanical system is, as we looked at the extent of the mechanical system, what we had to change up there. That building's broken into more zones, so it has more pieces of equipment. So that cost estimate was higher than originally estimated. Now that's built into this budget. Overall, sisters and the branches total budget didn't change this month. There's been some movement in between, so like those savings on sisters and Lapine, we were able to apply them to cover overages on Sun River and not hit our contingency. Same with, we did transfer some funds from, I have the temporary trailer down in a line item in owner's cost, the FF&E section. And I moved it up to where we'll actually contract for it. And so that was kind of a lateral movement out there. But from a construction standpoint, I'm really confident that we've got our budget right-sized and set for Sun River. That's in alignment with our final drawings. Sisters on Lapine are moving forward. Don't expect any big surprises. We'll have little things to issue to deal with, but like I said, we've been able to maintain our full owner's contingency as well. So in there, as we allocate those contingencies, kind of staying with the branches, East Bend. You know, we didn't change anything, we didn't reduce anything, we made sure that there really wasn't a big change to it. But the current budget, as said, still maintains construction budget, FF&E budget, early learning budget, everything. And so those dollars are really sound there. Overall, I tried to look at, hey, where were we early on and where are we at today? For the branches. It was a very small percentage early on, and we've actually been able to almost triple the budget for the branches. And so, because I've often heard you guys say, wanted to make sure that they were treated fairly and equally as the big branches. And so it was just kind of my reassessment of, hey, are they still getting their fair share? And are we doing everything that we can on our renovation projects? And, I can say, we're moving forward with every planned change in renovation today. No deletions or eliminations. As they've gone through the construction, they've found a couple things that we're fixing up around some windows and the way some flashings were done. have the potential for some long-term leakage. But while we're in there, we're trying to fix all of those, really looking at how our windows, the existing windows and systems behind are situated, because they're always potential for leaks. And so I think that was something, it was good to see the guys caught that out in the field and recognize, hey, this needs to be fixed. It's a minor cost, it costs us a little bit of money, but we didn't catch it now and it happened later. The district would spend thousands to fix. So that's kind of where we're at on the branches. Like I said, very happy with that. I do want to step back on our shelving systems, our furniture systems, all of our FF&E. There's components of the RFID technology and our AV and IT components all make up that. And then moving expenses and opening expenses. So we went through every one of those. You know, we've got pricing locked in on Sisters and Lapine for all of our shelving and our shelving millwork, that whole package. We've got all of our furniture purchased, making a couple of fine tunings on some of the display units for the shelving system, because being first out, they're guinea pigs, right? And so as we see the designs and develop them, they're getting tweaked, but it's, you know, it's really going to pay benefits. And then now we're going to be able to say, okay, we want one type C, one type A, one type B over here. And it's all done. So this is a really good testing ground. It's almost like a working prototype. And so with those budgets, we went back through them. Miller Hall did a really good job along with Chris on our team, really looking at all of our FF&E, what it's costing, updating our estimate on Sun River. The one for East Bend is really keeping it static, but I'm looking and saying, okay, is there enough money in to do what we want to do based on what we're paying over here? And the answer is yes, there is. But that's really helped us take those pricing and start applying as we go forward. And those vendors are on board working with us now, really helping to look at options. We talked about, we want shelving to be mobile to certain degrees to allow PPL flexibility. Well, how do you build them? How do you get access to them? Now, instead of Miller Holt just drawing what they think, we got the vendors in there saying, well, if you do it this way, I can build it cost effectively. And so there's some real value created there. Our early learning package is very much in the same boat, and it's probably of all the things furthest behind. But you know, we brought on our fabricator in the design assist role, and over the last since February, they've just been weekly collaboration all the time, working together. They being plus and greater than our designer along with Miller Hall and the figure plan. And big, literally determining how are they going to build all those little custom, you know, the carts and the trail paths and all those elements that we saw in the design. How do you build those? They're unique. And it's interesting because figure plans are not a contractor, right? We're not a construction company. They're a manufacturer. They make stuff and they think very differently than I do as a builder. But it's very cool to see they use a lot of the same types of systems that we use in scheduling and cost estimating and figuring out how to put these things together and the time. And you know, Sisters and Lapine, we're pushing them because of our schedule to get it done, get it built, and deliver it. It goes in right near the end before we open, but in conjunction with furniture. And so that's progressing well. We have a tight schedule on that. Their budget is right in. They've given us a high and low range, which is hitting right at our budget of where we were at. And so I'm pretty comfortable about that. We'll talk a little bit more about that on that award. But overall, those budgets all again stayed very static. We saw a movement between projects. Lapine is most expensive. And it has to do with just the number of pieces that could fit into the design. Sisters is a little bit less. And then Sun River, because the building is smaller, is a little bit less. Collectively, they're roughly all the same, but the distribution is slightly different. And it has to do with the exact lineal footage of a piece, or size of a piece, and its shape. So, I was capturing branches. Redmond is probably one of the others that had a lot of change this month. Because we set the final GMP with Kirby, and we've gotten that done. That's really locking in final construction costs. We have that, we'll go through that later. And to be able to look at where that was at, I had 30 million in the budget line item for that. We're gonna be at about 31.3 on that. Most of that's coming from the contingency. I've adjusted that up in there. And it kind of flipping back and gone a little out of order in the way I write this up, I realize. But I think it's third page, work package 3, Redmond Library. That was where it went up by that, roughly 1.3 million. 96,000 of that is the water line that we're doing, the street through the IGA with the city of Redmond, and they're funding that to us. They've already sent us 95% of the funds, then we'll distribute them as we do the work. But that is the adjustment on the budget for that. We'll go into more detail about the GMP award. The FF&E budget remained unchanged, but again, we did a full detailed analysis of all the components, utilized a lot of the pricing information we had gained from Sisters and Mopine because there's so many similarities to really update our furniture budget, our shelving budget, and our RFID budget because we've got final designs. Our RFID vendor, FE Tech, was able to update budgets there so that we were current on that and we knew where that was at. But all of that stayed intact. Our temporary facility budget is intact on that one. Same with our AV and IT components. That was something that Mark Bowden really puts together as he goes through and counts all the parts and pieces that he's going to need to buy, fit out the facility. And so that one stayed right in there. Our soft cost budget actually reduced, and that was a sizable reduction, almost 600,000 that the soft cost budget came down. And one of the biggest savings was in our plan check and our SDC charges. SDC are system development charges that cities are charging. Because this was an existing facility and we were already there, we were able to secure a lot of credits from the city where we didn't have to pay a lot of the SDC charges. So they were very, very low as compared to what we had forecasted, what we would expect being full load. And so it literally generated almost $600,000 in savings on the project. So that was one of the largest ones that we had on this project. We had some other small changes in our soft costs, but nothing of significant. You know, got to know all of our special inspections awarded and contracted. So we have a high confidence in all of our awards are done. Got pricing locked in with our consultants, and so that really helped us to do that. Overall, we reduced the project contingency here by 1,200 or 1.2 million. Its current contingency, combined contingency for the project, and this is just within the project, is 2.5 million, which is about 5.66%. And for me, I generally like to be somewhere between 3.5% and 5% when you're in construction as an owner's contingency. So I actually feel that we're very healthy on the contingency level here. And that's why we reduced this project budget down by 500,000 because of that savings coming out of our soft costs really. use of the contingency was to offset our construction costs, which is what we've had it there for. But like I said, it's still leaving us $2.5 million set aside for any big surprises that could pop out at us. And at this point, you know, those are fewer and fewer because we're done designing. We're getting all of our contracts locked in so that our pricing is secure with Kirby as well as with all of the subcontractors from an estimation standpoint. The next big one, and this can go back to Stevens Ranch. So as we finished the schematic design, which we looked at in February, we got Kirby went through and did a full cost estimate, and as well as JLD, our cost consultant. So this is, you know, we had our concept design last fall, and we had a concept budget, which the contractors have to, I don't want to say yes, but they have to be very creative of thinking, what are they going to draw in the future? And so with schematic, the change in plans is very significant in the amount of detail and information that the contractor gets from the design team to understand more about what they're going to draw. They also had a lot of work sessions for months as the plans were being drawn. They're sitting there listening and talking to the engineers. They join their meetings to understand how they're going to build stuff. So Kirby put that together. I will say, you know, the first pass we got was way over our budget. And then we started working through and going through it, making sure that, okay, what was this, and that started bringing it down. It's understanding. It's like, oh, okay, we planned for a whole bunch and it's not as much. Today, where we sit is that we had 86 million planned for the construction budget. And that was a number that I put in when I did the last budget update, and I've updated that 87.5. Our current estimate of where we sit today puts us actually about at 87. That was as late as yesterday when we met with the team, went through, you know, we have our working budget that we're always monitoring it as we go through. We're evaluating alternates and designs. JLD's cost estimate, you know, their first estimate was actually under. But once we went through reconciliation to make sure they understood what the architects intended, because they didn't sit through all the meetings, came back up, and there sits just around 86 million is where their estimate is as compared to where Kirby's is. So they're very close. I always use Kirby's numbers because they're our contractor. They're who's going to build it. But JLD gives us a really good checks and balances and some good lively debate over scope of work and cost of work, and you know, between Kirby estimators and the JLD estimators. So it's a good process that we go through, keeps everybody in check and in balance, and creates ideas. So right now, our construction budget, I've adjusted it to accommodate for that. But very confident that we're actually running under that budget at the moment. It'll continue to change as we go through, you know, it fluctuates, and that's why we do have contingencies. Within the cost estimates from Kirby and JLD, we still maintain design estimating contingencies inside their estimate, as well as a estimate for the cost escalation due to time and inflation. And so both of those, and we talk about those with both JLD and Kirby of what do they see, you know, it's kind of an interpretation of, okay, how much is not in the plans that you're worried about, and that's what that design estimating contingency is for, what's going to show up, and then what's going on in the world right now relative to inflation in the construction market. Lumber's been coming down. Metals are going up, you know, there's always fluctuation going on. So I think we have good percentages built in there. built within is probably 18% contingency for those two items within those estimates, which helps to make me feel confident. We've got an estimate of the cost of work, but we got a lot of good built-in contingency. And then I have the owner's contingency down below. And, you know, it's still running at, on the owner side, just for construction, it's about 8-9% that I'm holding down there to make sure that we have an adequate owner's contingency for any real big surprises. As far as the balance of the budget for Stevens Ranch, you know, on the site due diligence cost, that actually has come down by about 400,000. Robert has gone through and really done a complete scrutiny of the costs that were applied to the project that were associated with the roll property. And so those were costs that, because we're not building there, have been backed out of the project cost because we're not building it there. So therefore it can't be part of the bond. And we recognized that this month, those reductions. And so all of those came out. Compass Commercial, we had them do an evaluation of the lot 2 property on our site to really tell us, well, what is its value? We took an extremely low approach on its value, and they gave us a more realistic value. So it adjusted our number a little bit. We didn't adjust it anywhere close to what they think the real value is. It's much higher than we're forecasting, but it had a slight change, as well as the estimated costs for closing costs and brokerage fees. I went with a much higher number than what they said it would be. So I was able to reduce those fees in the estimate as well. So that captured about $400,000 reduction in that part of the budget. The hard cost, again, it was increased by 1.5 million. The FF&E budget stayed the same. Same process. We really went through a detailed review of everything associated with that, and very comfortable that what's planned for the building fits within our budget for all of those elements throughout there. The soft cost budget actually increased, and that was due to builder's risk insurance primarily. Brown and Brown, I talked to him after we finished Redmond's purchase of the builder's risk policy. And we had our schematic design. There's a little bit of difference between the building type and its technical element of the building. But we're what is considered 1 hour construction on Stevens Ranch, which wasn't the case on Redmond. And probably expected to get a little bit more of a break on the cost of our builder's risk insurance, but they took it out to the underwriters and had them look at it and came back saying, no, they're going to treat it as if it was just a plain old wood frame building. And which right now those rates are the highest there are for purchasing builder's risk insurance. And so I recognize that in my estimate, so I put it up, which increases that line item, and that's why there was an increase on the soft cost budget. Overall, we reduced the project contingency by $1,650,000 to really offset those. So we didn't increase the budget for Stevens Ranch, but I did move some of the contingency dollars up to where I thought we would spend it, as well as recognize some of those savings. Overall, you can see the portion of the contingency for Stevens Ranch, it's still a little over 10 million there, which is sitting at about 8%. Very comfortable with that because I also know that we've got our built-in contingencies in our construction cost estimate and in our FF&E estimate. At this point in our FF&E estimate, we're still carrying a 15% built-in contingency. And that helps to allow for added pieces, unit prices that may change, so that there's not an impact for scope creep, which will happen as we develop the design. You know, it's always, let's have a different piece or a different shape or a different type, which is normal in the development of this site. So feel comfortable that we have good built-in contingencies. We've got a really good analysis of where we sit today on Stevens Branch, and that our overall project contingency is very helpful. One of the things that in the sources side was that we got another update from Piper and Sandler, who manages the investment portfolio, which are the bond funds that are invested, and a very sizable increase because of what's going into the market is that we recognized $1.2 million increase in our budget, and that's in the interest earned. And so these are the investments that are locked in place. They're conservative investments. But because of the rising interest rates and the size of the dollars we have, it really makes a big difference. So that caused the overall budget to go up, as well as the $96,000 that the city is funding us, city of Redmond. So those were the changes. So one of the big changes of where that money go, and it really went to downtown Bend. And there was a couple little soft costs that I was looking at for some of the costs for opening, which was about $20,000. So the soft cost went up by $20,000. But the project contingency within downtown Bend went up by $1 million. And as that, increase in revenue, the sources of interest earned came in, it just felt like, okay, I don't see a need to put it into Stevens. Don't need to add money. I'm taking money out of Redmond, right? Because we don't need it there. The branches are healthy. And so we put this fund into the contingent downtown Bend. I just think I want to build up that budget, because when we get to doing downtown Bend, it's a big building, there's a lot there, we have a healthy budget, but I'd rather have a little extra set aside for when we make fun. One of the biggest things we're going to do in here is really re-look at our mechanical system and our lighting in here. All of the architectural and design changes are real easy to look at. But we know that this mechanical system is new and really set it up to go into the future. We want to do a major renovation of that system. That'll be where we spend a really big chunk of money. So that was what I did there, and it just places it overall with all these changes, because of that increase coming in, our reserve contingency also increased by 800,000 or more. And it's at 2.7, and that's just, it's not assigned to any of the 4 work packages. It sits in what is the master. It's kind of outside of it, so it's there on top of the plan contingency. And so it's another level in my mind of protection, cushion for a rainy day. Overall, our total contingency it was decreased by $1,078,000. It's down to a total of $20,157,000, which is 9.19%. So last month we were like at 9.79% of our total cost. And so it's a very healthy contingency. And now that's distributed amongst all the projects where I think it needs to be, as well as in that master. Those contingency dollars could be moved wherever if we need them. They're not locked in. It is one total budget with buckets that we're spending. So very healthy there. It's good to see that it's still like at that high level, this deep into the project. So it gives me good confidence that from a project budget sound, the bond program is very sound. Each of the branches has adequate funds in the budget to do whatever we plan to do with them. So overall, I think the time and effort we put into doing all of this, it makes me feel a lot more confident sitting here and talking to you guys to tell you, here's where we're at on this. Here's how it's going. As I talk to Todd and his staff, you know, we go through these in detail. You know, it gives me a lot of confidence in doing well, the work is progressing well, schedule and budget. So those were the biggest things that went on over the last. It's been taking 2-3 months, but very active in the month of March and finance. On procurement and contracts, we'll talk about the Kirby Nagelhout, the final GMP amendment 3, which sets the full GMP for Redmond, which is one of the summaries I gave you. And then we're also going to talk about the, you know, as we went through on Sisters and Lapine, we bought a lot of stuff through the cooperative agreements, which are contracts that DPL is party to, but there was little pieces that weren't covered under those cooperative agreements that we had to go out and do an RFP for. And now that we've been through that process and saw who was interested in what is, we're proposing to do a special procurement process as we move forward with those vendors that we selected. We'll dive into that in more detail as we go through these. But that's been the major activity from a procurement standpoint, is those activities. In the insurance, there's really no claims, no issues. Our vendors are all getting enrolled, all of our subcontractors in our DSIP program. So no news there, which is always good news. You really don't want to hear anything about insurance. That means there's no claims. The entitlements on Stevens Ranch. So we'll be submitting our site plan application this month, later this month. And that'll be going in, and that's, we have our public hearing actually tomorrow night on that project. And that's, it's a formal requirement of the site plan that, you know, within a certain radius of the property, we have to give them notice and hold a meeting. We've had other meetings, you know, we had the open house. Most of you guys attended that a few weeks ago, which was just our own way of part of the public outreach to share with the community what's going on. This one is a formal requirement by the city as part of the site plan application process. So it'll be very similar online. And then that site plan will go in. Not expecting any significant issues there, you know, on kind of the land issues, because we purchased land being developed by a developer. They're doing a lot of the other stuff. You know, they've already done their master plan. Our tentative map, which is the map of our property that we're purchasing, that's been into the city. The developer submitted it. They've been going back and forth on that. And that's the legal document that creates our parcel for us. And so that's in process. They are going to be in conjunction with that. They build the streets around us. So Santorini Street to the east, Wilderness Way to the south, and then 27th Street to the west. And they're anticipating starting that work here this summer. And so they'll be building them actually on the inside first. They'll be working on Wilderness Way and Santorini Street, because part of Santorini then connects to a bypass road that they're building on their property, so they can close 27th Street. They've got to put a big sewer line that goes down the middle of 27th Street, and it's really deep. And so they'll be closing parts of it. So they're building a whole road that actually bypasses that. So when they're under construction, it minimizes traffic. You know, they'll have their local traffic going through there, but for the community. On their side, that's progressing really well. I don't know if you've seen, they've been inching closer and closer to 27th Street with streets. In the report, I put a link, and hopefully it opened up for you where you could actually see the video of the flyover of what they've been doing. And it really shows you all the grading and infrastructure work that's going on right to the east of 27th Street. They just haven't pushed all the way to the edge, and so the trees still block a lot of them. But from an entitlement standpoint, their work is progressing as planned, on track. You know, our closing date is in, for them to give us a final map is November, so they're right on track with that. They're very happy with that. Some of the design elements of Stevens Ranch, we've gone through.
Greg, can I just pause for a second? We, if I may, I think we'd like to go to our budget committee appointment real quick, because we've got Dan Quick here and we don't want to take up his lunch break.
Mine is good.
Because we know you're gonna be here.
You're gonna be here for hours.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're gonna skip ahead.
so just in the budget committee, we had two vacancies. One, Pat Minnie's term ended. She did reapply, so I put her original application in with this. And then we had Dan Quick, who is here with us, applied as well. And thought this is a good opportunity for you if you have any questions with Dan while he's here. I didn't ask Pat to be here since she's been on the committee.
And we have two positions to fill.
Two
correct?
positions to fill.
Right.
That's. So unless Dan says something really bad. I'm
Dan, do you want to do just a little introduction of yourself, and so we can get to know you a little more than just on paper?
Yeah, absolutely. So Dan Quick, I actually just work right across the street, so it was pretty easy to hop over here. I'm a senior budget and financial planning analyst for the city of Bend. I've been doing that for about 4 years here. Prior to that, my family and I lived in Virginia, northwest of DC, about an hour. I was the budget and financial planning for a county out there. So I've been doing budget for quite a while, and I love libraries. I have 4 kids, 6, 4, and 2 18-month twins. We go to the library very often, and so I love libraries, and thought this would be a good way to use some of my skills and experience to help the library out. So.
All right, well, thank you very much. Do people have any questions of Dan?
Just want to say I appreciate your interest. Yeah, thank you very much.
And you're bringing that level of expertise that's really helpful to us as well, so.
No guarantees of expertise, but
Yeah. Cynthia, do you have any questions? Okay. All right, well, I would entertain a motion regarding appointment of budget committee members. People have no further discussion.
I would move that we appoint Dan Quick and Pat Minnie to the budget committee.
Great, that'll be for a 3-year term ending June 30th, 2025.
All right, do I hear a second?
I
second.
Okay, beg your pardon?
Is it 3 years for both, Pat and?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Dan. We look forward to seeing you next month.
Send
Yeah.
us some information on the budget meetings.
Yeah, all right. Thanks a lot for coming over.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, right?
Quite all right. Gives me a minute.
Yeah.
Stop talking. Sometimes I talk.
Well, no, you've got a lot to cover.
Yeah.
We appreciate your level of detail. So.
So I'm kind of talking on the design and construction that's in the report there, Stevens Ranch. We moved out of the schematic into design development. It's moving full speed ahead. We did a kind of a snapshot of progress in time next week of what's the 50% DD budget for plans. It really lets us look at how are the designs progressing, how are they doing, are they consistent with what we wanted? And Nagelhout is also asking us lots of questions, presenting. We have every week, either in person or over the phone, where they'll talk about pieces. And it's like, okay, today we're gonna talk about this piece of the building and then this piece. Walk through where they wanted to, as they develop the design, they figure out, hey, what's working, what's not, where do they have questions, and where do they want input and approval from DPL as we progress through the design. The other part that goes with that, which we talked about, is the cost side, right? And their engagement with Kirby and us to talk about, okay, what alternates and how are we doing on budget? And how are we incorporating alternate systems, procedures? A lot of what we really focused on in our cost side, maintaining our budget, was about our structural system and our systems and our skin, and how do we make sure that those are cost-effective systems. So, because what you don't want to do is change the program. One space that staff and the public are going to use to remain consistent, and the service that they can do to remain consistent. But that to really work through the building to make sure that hey, we have a very cost-effective building. That's something I think that they're very cognizant of as a design team. Like I said, they invite Kirby to do a lot of their design work sessions with their consultants. So Kirby joins every structural meeting with the structural engineer, which I think is great because you spend a lot of money on structure, and it's where you can spend money and not see anything different, right? And you can also save money and not see anything different, which is what we want to do. And then same with whole skin; those are two big components that cost a lot of money. We're using a access floor system we talked about, and so it's a raised floor and lets us run air conditioning and plumbing and electrical, all that stuff. And that takes a lot of work to really design that to be a functional and effective system. Kirby is, we've done a lot on that in Redmond, and now they're really applying lessons learned already. We haven't built Redmond, but we've gotten through a lot of the modeling of the building and how we're going to run every piece of pipe through the building and how it's going to fit. And those lessons learned are moving right over Stevens Ranch and what they need to do and how they need to do it. So, I think that's one of those real values that we talked about early on about the CMGC process, and we can see it happen today. So that's really positive. Our FF&E design and our early learning designs are tracking right with the building, which is where we want them to, because they're very integrated to the building. But it also lets us manage the whole picture, not in separate pictures, right? How do they work together? How do the budgets work together? And so when we look at budgets, it's like, I want to see every piece, not just construction costs, and ignore our FF&E, because that's a big chunk of money that we spend on that. And so they're very in sync. I think Plus and Greater Than had been running a little bit behind, and they caught up to where they're right there. And we saw, just a presentation of progress. You could really see how they were integrating into the space, all the different zones. I don't know if you remember the floor plan where they had the kids zone and all the teen zones, and they had all those. You can really see how they're melding together really well. So that process is all moving along, happening well. Our site design is really taking shape because of our site plan application going in. We want that to be the right amount of information that the city requires you to submit, but that we're very comfortable with that. And so that has to do with our closets, our parking lots, our landscaping, how the building is situated, how we're doing the loading dock. We made some good refinements to that make the building a little more efficient and effective. We had to move our transformer because of our coordination with CEC, who's our supplier there, and for power, what they wanted to see. We were able to share our designs with them and what they wanted, and they wanted certain separations, positioning, literally down into the bug dust of how the conduits work. And so, but those are all good things to get figured out early on. Right now, they don't cost you anything to move them. It costs you a lot if you don't figure it out early. That's the change orders you don't want. So that's moving right along. Happy with that. Progressing on schedule from a design standpoint. Redmond, all of our permits are issued. We're 100% approved and marching on full speed on Redmond. So they were pouring concrete on the building yesterday. Really got, which is exciting. Start to see the building. It's coming up out of the ground. So they did a lot of earthwork, they demo, and they've got site utilities going. And big pour yesterday for all of our foundations and elevator pits and some of those things. So you'll start to see that in the photos. I put a photo in the report, but there's also a link there. And I'm hoping those links opened up for you. It should have. To a video. So we have been flying a drone over the project, and we'll do the same on Stevens Ranch, where you can watch that video and they fly all the way around nice and slow and look at it. And, each month also add in photos. I'm going to try and continue to add them in as we go, because I think it really helps to tell a good story. Another big thing that happened, of course, which most of us were in attendance, was the groundbreaking in Redmond, and is well attended. I think we talked about that last in March, but something I just felt really needed to know. And the final real thing that we did this month was completion of the GMP. So the last bits of design that we're working on is finalizing our FF&E design for all the furniture and the shelving, because we don't open Redmond until next year. It kind of paused a bit so everybody could focus on Sisters in Lapine. Now they're back in, really focused on finishing Sun River and Redmond, and that's a process that over the next 6 months we'll finalize all those designs, go out for final pricing, and there'll be points throughout between now and October where we'll bring to you guys any approvals for cost estimates, all of that. The early learning is also right in that same stage. It's finalizing. They've got a heavy focus on Sisters in Lapine, and they're also at Sun River, actually going right with Sisters in Lapine, so similar, and that they want to make sure that they really look at those three collectively, and then Redmond's kind of right. So those are moving right along on Sisters, Lapine, and Sun River. Like I said, there's really no major design work there. Sun River is plan check. That's just progressing. We're working on the temporary facility for the trailer, getting that permitted. There isn't a lot there. I just looked to see what I put in my notes, but mostly it's stuff we talked about. I think last month when we met, we had just gotten approvals to for the Lapine temporary location, and so that got finished, opened, and that's moving right along. So I think those are all at this point progressing. Points. East Bend, that on hold at the moment, and nothing planned for downtown Bend. That'll kick off this next year. Payments, we're really just, those are progressing through cash flow. There's not a lot of changes. Kind of the summary on the photos for Sisters in Lapine. I asked, they had a lot of photos, the team did, but they were so detailed. They were taking pictures of little things where they were detailing for the architect. And I said, look, guys, shoot me a photo from one end of the building to the other in both directions so we can see your progress. And so you'll see a little better photos on those. And like I said, I'll always attach the current video for Redmond, as well as some photos in there. So hopefully those were that they turned out all right, gave you a sense of what was going on. I threw in that overhead photo for Redmond because I just kind of thought that was really pretty cool to look down from above.
Right.
Questions on anything in the report?
It's a lot. Anybody have any questions? Cynthia, do you? Yes?
Yeah, I do have a question. Unfortunately, I'm getting a lot of echoing, and at one point when Greg was talking about something, Owl was, or the closed caption wasn't able to pick up exactly what he was saying, and it was kind of garbled. But I wanted to ask him, so the increase from the bond interest, so that's just going into the contingency fund, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and then the $800,000 increase, where is that coming from? And where is it going?
It came out of the savings from Redmond
Oh, okay,
as the increase in the interest earned. And so those extra dollars went into the downtown Bend project contingency. And then the 800 went into the reserve contingency, which is really not assigned to a project at this point. It's
Okay.
just, it's really a
Okay.
fifth bucket of reserve money to allow us to have a little, it does cover, I should say, it does cover the general administration costs, which is the big number in there. There's two big numbers, our fees as your owner's rep and the collection. They make up the bulk of that. And so that's the contingency that would deal with them, so.
thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Yeah, let me ask you, you said the budget for the smaller branches is increased by 3 times?
Not completely. When we first started, it was about 6 million. I think it's up to like 17. Now, that was distribution of some of the premiums when we first got it, and as we just reallocate
What changes in the actual design of the construction?
So if you go back to the original bond program that was created, conceptual design, the budgets that were created at that time for the branches, the 4 branches, Sisters, Levant Sisters, and East Bend, were actually quite small. And they were really around a light renovation, is how I would call it, an interior finishes, new furniture, some upgrades to technology and that. As we got into it, and one of the very first things we did was a complete assessment of each building with Miller Hall and determined that one, the lighting and mechanical systems were really aged. And when you look at when the bond program was going to be done and what's the life of the building and the systems, they were nearing their end of life. And so things that increased in those branches in scope of work was a lot more removal and replacement of mechanical systems, electrical, not so much the power system, but the lighting system throughout. The power distribution that goes with changing, changing around the interior use as we move spaces around, outlets and feeds. But there's no changes to the main switchboards and that, the main power feeding the building. Plumbing system changed according to how we may have modified plumbing. Whether we added a sink here, when we created some workplaces. It also increased with when we identified areas that needed to be addressed. So some windows that had leakage, the roof that we put on Sisters, the structural repair. So Sun River had some significant structural where we wanted to reinforce that one whole portion of the roof structure. So that was in there. And we did more on the outside than I think was anticipated in the first estimate relative to the site work ADA compliancy was really not anticipated. And so we're bringing all of the properties up to ADA compliancy, and that's our sidewalks, our entry points, and our grading around those entry points. All three of the properties are updated from that standpoint, along with a certain amount of some of the landscaping that goes with that, cleaning that up. Exterior of the building, you know, there was some little alcoves and where we put the book drops, you know, we moved our book drops to align with our interior, so there's a certain amount there. Those are things that, as I've looked at what changed our the scope of work, it's really an increase in the amount that we're doing, is to try and address literally all of those pieces.
Just a reminder, those are changes that have been made with board approvals over the last 2 years. It's not something that happened last.
And I would always say, you know, this for myself, I do hear you guys talk about the importance of that, about the branches, and so we push that over to the architects to say, look, we know the glitz and glamour is over here, the big new buildings, everybody loves them. But we're going to treat every building, every facility, you know, we want you to really look at this and give it just due. Tell us what we need to do to set these buildings up to last another 25+ years. So that's been what drove that.
Yeah, I think that's really reflective of how everybody felt, is that we wanted each community to have a library that was prepared to go into the future.
Yes.
Not just from a technology standpoint, but from a building soundness standpoint, because that's going to save us a lot of money down the road.
Yeah.
So that's great. And I don't think you'll ever find out the scope of all of that until you begin to do those in-depth plans. Until you dig into what's inside those walls,
Yes.
what's under that roof. So yeah, I really commend you for doing that analysis. Set up well. Yes.
Did I understand you correctly? You said the global development costs were back into the bond.
They're taken out of the bond. Because we're not building out the global site, the costs associated with purchasing the land and so it's design work can stay as a bond cost, but the value, the purchase of the land and due diligence that occurred while it was allowed under the bond when we were going to build there, it is not allowed under the bond now that we're not building there.
I thought we had already done.
Robert had done it in on his side.
We did it in our budget. Greg hadn't taken it out of his budget.
Right.
That's what,
Oh.
we already had this discussion in the budget last
Okay.
year.
I did the land.
So you were just adjusting your budget for what we'd already done.
So we had done
Not that
the,
there was more.
no,
I was gonna ask you, where does more money come from?
Yeah. no, it was just
Good.
me really catching up with what Robert had already done. I did do the land cost last fall. Robert and I worked through all of the purchase of the land and I backed that out. But then after he really finished his deep dive on every consultant to say which ones could stay, which ones couldn't. I just held off until he was really confident and incorporated.
Yeah, we already done it.
So-
Yeah, he did it all on his side.
Good. So the public hearing tomorrow
Yes,
is all Zoom,
yes.
no in person.
No.
Those, that notice was sent out to, what was that?
It's a
There's a certain
500,
radius, right?
yeah,
That was it.
yeah, so it's a 500-foot
Did it
radius.
go out to the neighborhood associations?
Yeah.
Both the old farm and the
Larkspur. Is the,
Southeast Bend.
Larkspur is on, it's actually on the north edge of the development's property. So right across Reed Market is where Larkspur is. But those are the two that are within the 500-foot radius.
Oh, Southeast Bend. Was not either.
No,
Interesting. And what time is it?
It's at 6 o'clock.
Schedule you open 6 to 8.
Yeah, roughly, the presentation, generally takes, like on roll, it took about 15 minutes to half an hour.
Right.
To do the presentation, and then it's just a matter of questions. When we did the vocal one, we had 2-3 questions, and so it could go a half an hour and be over with, just depending. And I imagine because we've had a lot of outreach, most of the people who attended the meeting at the Larkspur Center, when we did our outreach, were a lot of the local community, I think, in the region. We'll see. Everybody that's in that radius, it really affects our neighbors across the street on 27. See what kind of attendance we get.
Okay, any other questions?
If we need to start the contract.
Yeah,
Contract.
okay. It is. Sorry. Okay, I'm going to begin the joint meeting of the Deschutes Public Library Board and the Local Contract Review Board. The purpose of this public hearing is to take comments on the district's draft findings supporting the exemption of certain classes, special procurements, and public improvement contracts from competitive bidding requirements. The first item on this in this joint meeting is to receive public comments. Are there any members of the public that would wish to comment? Hearing none, we will close the public comment section. And Todd, do you want to?
Sure, we have our attorney, Carrie Conley, is on the line with us, and maybe I'll hand it over to you, Carrie. This is just as a reminder. We did this in 2021, and the last time we'd done it had been a long time since we'd updated. So my goal is to keep us updated as the updates happen so that we're not getting behind. And so we have some new changes that we want to adopt. And Carrie, I'll hand it over to you for any explanation. I did send to the board your letter of explanation when we started this call.
Thank you for having me. So I'm not sure if the full board is familiar with me. My name is Carrie Connolly. I am an attorney over here in Eugene, Oregon. Our firm is Local Government Law Group, and we've provided legal services to Deschutes Public Library District for more than 10 years, a decade and a half, perhaps. And so I am one of the public contracting experts over here in the Valley, and really appreciate that your efforts to stay up to date. Just for a little bit of background, public contracting in Oregon for public entities is governed by statute. It's called the Oregon Public Contracting Code. And the reason you do these updates is because every time the legislature meets, they have the opportunity to change the public contracting code, which is set forth in ORS 279 A, B, and C. And so when those statutes get changed, it might be required for you to change your rules. And because you have your own rules in place, when they change, so the legislature changes the statutes, the AG changes what are called model rules. It's public contracting model rules. And you have opted out of those model rules. Your rules actually look very similar to the AG model rules, but they're simplified. I've taken out provisions that only apply to the state that you as a district don't need to follow. And we filled in some of the gaps that the AG leaves that you're authorized to fill in by statute. So every time the AG updates its model rules, you as an entity who have opted out of those model rules are required to review your rules and determine whether or not any changes are needed. And I undertake that for you. And then I tell you, hey, we actually did need to make some changes, or you're lucky, no changes needed this time around. And so the legislature's been kind of busy and has made changes the last couple sessions. And so that's why you're jumping through these very familiar hoops yet again. The biggest changes that were, they went into effect in January of 2022, and we sat around and waited until about this last fall. So I gave the AG about 8 months to update its rules. It never did, and I just figured these are really beneficial changes to your rules that I wanted you to be able to have in, I wanted you to have the flexibility. So the two major changes are increasing public improvement contracts direct appointment thresholds from 5,000 to 10,000, which means that any kind of public improvement contract that the district wants to enter into, you now don't have any procurement requirements by state law. You do have your own district policies and spending thresholds that staff complies with. But as a matter of your rules, I wanted those to reflect state law. So I've increased that threshold from 5 to 10,000. And then after today, to the extent, assuming that you adopt these rules and once they go into a place, no public hearings will necessarily be required for public improvement exemption adoptions. You'll have to publish notice, and if somebody requests a hearing, you will then have a hearing on those proposed exemptions, but no hearing is necessarily required. The letter that was included in your packet did mention a little bit about spending authority, and I just wanted you to know that I went through a spending authority update with your staff in June of 2022. So the library directors, Todd's spending authority now matches the threshold for intermediate procurements for goods and services, which is $150,000. So I think you're pretty up to date on that spending authority. You have a really good delineation between procurement rules and spending authority. Obviously, the notice was published where you're proceeding appropriately for the adoption process, which was the next section of the letter. And I'm just here then to answer any questions. I know that this is a large number of pages included with this rule update, and there are kind of some maybe confusing findings associated with the exemptions. The exemptions are the final section of the rules. They go division 46, 47, 48, 49, tracking with the OARs that govern the same subject matters, but then you differ from the AG model rules because you have exemptions in that final section. And that's what the findings are associated with, is just that last section of the rules that are in your packet. Beyond that, that's my overview. Happy to address any questions you might have.
Does anybody have any questions for Carrie? Okay. Todd, do you have anything you would like to add?
No, I think it's pretty clear cut. I think at this point, if you wish to proceed, we have need to pass resolution number 15, which outlines the change.
Okay. And I think Todd has some suggested language for us. Would anyone care to make a motion? For resolution 15, adoption of public contract unit.
Yeah, I'll move to adopt public resolution 15 on behalf of the Deschutes Public Library District, on behalf of the district's local contract board.
Thank you, Ray. There's a second.
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Carrie. That was a clear explanation of a complicated topic.
Not my first rodeo.
Yeah.
Do you want me to stay on through the rest of the public contracting materials, or do you have a preference on that, either board or Todd?
That's up to the board. I think we're pretty clear here. We just have two sole source issues that we're looking at.
Yeah. I think we're good. Is that-
Wonderful. All right. Well, it's always fun tuning in and seeing you, and thanks so much for all the great work you're doing.
Okay,
Thank
thank you,
you.
Carrie.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay, so next up is resolution 16, sole source for shelving millwork.
Yes, for that one, I brought in a special expert. His name is Greg Holcomb. And he'll walk us through this.
Yeah, and so I wrote up a summary of why we're requesting 16 and 17, even though there are two resolutions. They're very similar for us. So as I mentioned earlier, as we went out on Sisters and Lapine and we're utilizing the cooperative agreements, we're purchasing our metal shelving system, which is the Space Saver Corporation, through the Sourcewell cooperative agreement. There's components of the shelving system that weren't included in the cooperative agreement. And it's the custom millwork pieces that get added to it. And when you customize a display unit, you know, and for the library, we need them customized to put books on in a particular way. Well, those aren't listed in the cooperative agreement because they list the standardized stuff. So we bought everything that was in the cooperative agreement under that. Then we wrote an RFP and published it, a public bid out for the millwork components that go with it. And that happened last December. And then in January, we brought the results to you guys. It was awarded. Space Saver Specialists, who is the dealer for Space Saver, the metal shelving component, and who we hired for that, proposed on the millwork components and was awarded that contract. And they were the only ones who responded to it. In part because it's single system, but we had to buy it in two components. And now that we have them on board and we have unit pricing that we developed through that millwork RFP, we're requesting through this resolution to use the special procurement and sole sourcing to work with Space Saver Specialists going forward on all of the future programs to provide us that cost. The cost will still come back to the board for approval as we get to them. But what we would be doing is issuing separate RFPs each time. And part of it is, we don't believe that there's going to be a lot of other vendors trying to come in because of the challenge of having one system. The other, and we put this in the resolution, what are the benefits to DPL? Why should we do this? You know, one of them is we think we have better cost control because as we're working, our vendors working with our design team about how they can build stuff and how they can do those things, we get that collaborative work together. Early pricing, so they're doing preliminary pricing for us on our systems before we finish the designs to work out any of the kinks. And they come up with, hey, this is costing a lot of money, and we change it to this, and you know, be more cost effective. So there's an element of being cost effective in our designs and before versus bidding it and then go back and redesign it after the fact. So we get it right the first time. It just is more efficient use of time and planning. Schedule is also another element as we work with our vendors. It's very similar to why we use the CMGC approach. That these vendors can look at and say, hey, we can get you into this production slot because we're working quicker through the process. When we do an RFP, it generally is about a 2-month process from when we start writing the RFP, issue it, receive proposals, and get all the way to the contract. This will shorten that time where we can be overlapping some of our activities with them in our reviews. So as we are getting, we just did a review of shelving systems because they're on board, they're willing to look at them and give us comments early. So this is be allowing us to work directly with them. They will give us their pricing and we'll be able to go through their itemized pricing, just like we do with our contractors. and analyze it, make sure we're getting fair, just pricing. I think the other thing it does in the long term for DPL is we have a single source vendor now identified who will build the system, install the system, complete all the millwork and all of the metal components. And that as we go forward, EPL will always have that vendor. So they're located here in Oregon, they're the Oregon dealer, to be able to help with future, whether it's renovations, repositioning, repairs, if something gets damaged, that kind of thing. So it does allow EPL to have that single source of contact. Our warranty issues are, we now have one person to look at versus if we would find multiple components. And I think the other piece was, to make sure that the millwork pieces get built the same way every time because they are custom. We have different millwork shops that to make sure that they look the same, they're built the same, the materials are very consistent. One of the goals is that the shelving system could be moved from branch to branch, a display that we don't need to use it in La Pine, but we could use it over at Sun River, can be picked up and it fits in because it looks the same. So that's, we try to spell that out in justification for resolution 16. In there, questions?
Any questions for Greg? Sense?
Just one thing, let me make it clear. On page 3. Be resolved, and then it says amounts will be approved separately by the board on an individual project basis. And then further on, it says the district board, Todd Uncle Gordon is authorized representative, authorized to execute and deliver on the district's behalf all contracts for this transaction, subject to review of legal counsel. So I'm reading this as saying the board will review every single purchase. The Todd has the authority to go ahead.
Yes.
Sign for it, but not negotiate.
Yeah, sometimes it's within Todd's signing, right? So if it's within the $150,000 limit, then he would be able to sign this person. I don't know that we will have any of them that are actually within that 100. There may be like one or two things.
Yeah.
Most of the time, we will be coming back because it will exceed his authorization level, right? Or as we go forward with the next multiple branches.
Any additional questions? Entertain a motion on resolution 16 first.
Move to adopt resolution 16 on behalf of the Deschutes Public Library District and on behalf of the district's local contract review board.
You're here a second. Cynthia seconded.
Yes.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
I,
Motion passes unanimously.
The next resolution, it's the same aspect with our furniture. So we're purchasing our furniture through 4 different cooperative agreements currently, and we actually have, I think, maybe 5 or 6 that we pick from. And our dealer, Pacific WRO, represents those cooperative agreements. And so when we did Sisters in La Pine, we realized, okay, we purchased about 90% of all the pieces through those 4 cooperative agreements, but there was a few pieces of furniture that weren't in a cooperative agreement. And so we did the RFP, went out, Civic WRO did respond, and we awarded to them. As we go forward, we're gonna have some of these again, where it's 1 or 2 pieces that aren't under a cooperative agreement, and for the consistency and workability, not having to issue another RFP for 1 or 2, because it doesn't get the attention of other dealers because the bulk is there. We're asking that under resolution 17, we use the special procurement and sole source with Civic W1O for the purchase of those components.
Any questions? Entertain a motion on resolution 17.
I move to adopt resolution 17 on behalf of the Deschutes Public Library District and on behalf of the district's local contract review board.
Yeah. Any second?
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye.
I,
Passes unanimously. Okay, so, at this point, I will adjourn the joint meeting of the Deschutes Public Library Board and the Local Contract Review Board, and I will resume the regular library board meeting.
May I suggest a break?
Yes, and we will take a 10-minute break. All right.
Thanks, Judy.
So it was, again, bringing those subs up to date, capturing any of those loose ends. And as an example, one of those was our builder's risk insurance policy. The carrier said, hey, you have to provide this type of security camera system that monitors the site and monitors for heat detection for fire and that kind of stuff. It's a fairly extensive system that they're requiring us to do, and so that was something that we bought out. And we also captured within here the dollars of the street improvement work, And so there's a number of things in the summary. I attached an Excel spreadsheet in there, and it kind of captures, this is one of our working documents with Kirby. And it just really attaches what from our original budget, the GMP amendment 1, then 2, and what their combined total was and what we'd already approved. We had an amendment 3 budget that we were tracking, and then the amendment 3 actual cost and variance. And then there you can see a column that's called permit set updated costs. Those are the costs that were associated with subcontractors we had on board, but bringing them up current. Change requests were things that were not necessarily a plan revision, but a change in scope that we requested, like this security system. And there's a few others in there. Some of them, you can see some were credits. The other is there's a couple of columns there called buyout savings and allowance reconciliation. So within Kirby's GMP2, the big one, we had some buyout forecasts of things that they needed to buy out, and we had budgets for them. And then we also had allowances, and allowances are defined in the contract just as really it's a budget of money for a scope of work that it wasn't ready to be bought out. Well, they've been able to go through a lot of those reconciliations and allowances and make adjustments to them. So I literally go through all of these and pick up, there's one set of future change order values, and those are some changes, and these are things that we see that are going on between the architect and the contractor and ourselves, and it's at the very bottom of page 2. Those all add up to what is that number on page 2 that says GMP 31,254,000. Well, that's that part of it, where they grab when they sent me this. And so this is where I set in my summary an authorization level up to 31,300,000, because I know it's going to flex a little bit as we finalize this. As you can imagine, there's a lot of subcontractor awards. What Kirby does, they assemble every subcontractor award letter for us of who turned in bids, copies of their bids. They do a full analysis of the subcontractor bids and the trade, and present that all to ourselves. We go through all of that along with every one of the costs that you see on this spreadsheet. And so we digest that with the architect is involved heavily in reviewing, to make sure they're in agreement. Yeah, that was a change of scope, or no, it's shown on the plan right here. That's not a bad cost. So we'll complete our vetting. We're to a point where we've vetted almost all of this. Kirby is sending us final documents for execution, and that's why I wanted to bring it today. Establish the authorization level for Todd, and that way we complete these, because we'll be sending them over to Todd in waves of documents, and pieces get approved in small chunks, and then they are rolled into the actual contract, and then so we'll do amendment 3, set the final GMP. We'll also do a separate change order after amendment 3 for the water line work for the 96,000 in the street. And that's because we do have to have an accounting tracking of that separate from the bond, because it's paid for by the city. And it's just one of the things bond counsel advised us early on, make sure that you track those things separately. And then there's a few costs that we'll probably put in a separate change order. It's within the 31.3, but we may not be ready to say, Todd, this is ready for your execution, because we're still figuring out some stuff. But this will give us that authorization level. We know we're making the change. We're just finalizing the exact design and final cost of everything. There's a couple of those things that end up in that what's called future change order value 332 on that bottom, that second page. So it's kind of my high level summary over what I wrote there. Questions?
Any questions for Greg?
I had a kind of I need a clarification. I just want to make sure I'm understanding it. I have to admit, I get lost in all the acronyms sometimes when I'm reading these reports. But so I want to make sure I understand. So initially, the board approved the $26,350 for the Nagelhout construction fees. And the change is now being made to $31,300. So basically, what we're going to be making a motion on is just that we're increasing it from that initial to the one now. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Right. Thank you. I just wanted that clarification.
The only thing I would correct you on, Cynthia, that you said you use the word thousand and it's millions.
Oh, millions. Yes, I know it's millions. Thank you for the correction. Yes, I knew that.
It's being recorded. It better make sure that
Right.
that's stated.
Yes.
Okay, any other questions? I would entertain a motion.
I'll attempt to make a motion from here. I don't have Todd's words all written down for me. So I move that the board authorizes that the library director has the authorization to sign up to $31,300,000 for the Kirby Nagelhout Construction Company for the Redmond Library construction contract, plus the original CMGC pre-construction service cost of $115,500 for a combined total of $31,415,500. Is that close to what I should be saying?
Right, except I think the pre-construction services cost is actually $115,000.
Actually, she has it right, I have it wrong.
Oh, all right, well then, excuse me.
Yes.
Then it was perfect,
The
Cynthia.
total was correct.
Okay,
job.
all right. Okay.
I think she did it.
Okay, do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
I
All right, motion passes unanimously. Okay, now we're on to the CEC contract and fees.
Yeah, so this is for Stevens Ranch. So CPC, Central Electric Cooperative, is our electrical provider for the property there. And the costs that are here are those fees that we would be paying either directly to CPC or reimbursing the developer. And I tried to describe it in the summary. There's 3 separate contracts that came out in CEC. So the power starts, our power fee for the library starts at the Rickard substation, which if you guys are familiar, there's a substation just east of the landfill off of Rickard Road. And so that's CEC refers to it as Rickard substation. They have a set of existing power poles that come around the landfill, and they come right past the CEC's office, and there's a Public Works and the Humane Society building right there. They come and they hit 27th Street. It's right at where Ferguson is. You know where
Okay,
Ferguson
right.
is. So CEC is bringing an overhead wire on those existing poles all the way over. And so that's work that they are going to perform 100% themselves. They'll engineer it, they'll design it, they will install it. And we reimburse that cost. And that is actually a cost that we negotiated up front with the developer for them to pay for half. That was part of the discussion, negotiations in the PSA when we purchased. At that point, the power goes down the pole and underground. And so from that point, the developer then builds a conduit system. It's conduit and pull box and stuff. It goes all the way up 27th Street to Wilderness Way, and then it turns and goes into the development along Wilderness Way. And it will eventually kind of spider web out across parts of their development. But they also turn and go up Santorini Street on our east side. And in that conduit system are conduits. Now, originally, we thought we could share conduits there, the developers conduit. CEC came back and said, no, we want a separate system for the library in that conduit system. And so the developer's building it for us at his cost. CEC has a charge for our line. We'll have a dedicated feeder that comes all the way from right here to a switch, which is going to be located right on Santorini. And the developer builds all of that underground system and puts all the pads. CEC pulls the cable all the way. So when it comes off of the pole, it then goes underground. They will pull the cable all the way up and set whatever equipment they need. And every once in a while, they'll need a switch. And they will do that. So they have a fee for their cable and their switches and the labor of installing all that. So that's a contract number 2. So the first contract was between CEC and the developer, and we reimbursed the developer 50% of that cost. Contract 2 is between CEC and the developer, because they're building all this infrastructure and bringing it up to us. And then that one, we reimbursed the cost of cable, because that cable is now dedicated to us. The one that comes over the power lines kind of feeds everybody. Once it gets to the switch on Santorini, right at kind of near our front driveway where we come in, it's off to the side. From the switch into our building, we actually build the conduit system. Kirby will build that, and it's in our cost estimate. CEC will design their part, but they will install the cables and the transformer and our electric meter. And they pull all of that in there. So that's contract number 3, that we at DPO will execute that contract and then pay those fees. So the authorization today for Todd is 1, to execute the one contract we have directly with CEC, and the authorization to actually make the payments to the developer who is paying CEC for contracts 1 and 2 that they are signing. That makes sense. It's kind of a little bit convoluted, but it's the way CEC wanted to do this. So these fees are all built into the budget. I think last month I may have told you I had to actually up them a bit because they came in higher. Overall, there's been one of the costs that is escalating right now is electrical costs and delivery times. The time to get our transformer and the switch and the wire that goes in this is between 12 and 18 months after. So we're ordering it now to get it in about a year and a half from now. And that's to get it to CEC's yard. And at that point, then they will store it there and then come out and install it when we're ready. But so it's a big award early. We've gotten, with our schematic design, we were able to confirm that our electrical service size was appropriate from what we gave them 6 months ago. And so it was now time to do it. 1, to get them on order, and try and hopefully minimize any cost fluctuations in the future and delivery. So I think the total cost is Okay, yeah, the 988,760, that's the amounts that is actually the amounts that we reimburse the developer that go to CEC and our direct contract with CEC.
Does anybody have any questions? Greg?
Right, our electrical needs, for the central library, just too great for us to use the conduits then that the developers putting in. Is that why CEC is having us do our own conduits, or?
It's a little bit of both, you know,
Okay.
so, you know, one of the things is that we committed to an all-electric system.
Right.
Which said no fossil fuels and with our lead certifications and those things. So that drove our electric loads up higher. Being where we're at, there isn't a lot of existing infrastructure out there. And so what is there is limited in capacity. Even if we had been a gas electric system, our load would have been lower. But we don't know that they still would have had enough capacity, because one of the things we have learned is that CEC is building a new substation to feed basically the eastern part of Bend. Because with all of the growth that has happened on the east side, their original capacity is being eaten up, and the promotion of stop using gas and go all electric is draining the infrastructure, what they have really fast. So they're also looking at this and saying, okay, we can't just use it all up in one shot. We got to start adding infrastructure. And because we're a big user, they wanted to get that so that what they have can still be shared with the rest of the community.
Mhm.
Makes sense.
Okay.
The letter we have from Central Electric,
Says districts.
that's it.
Yeah, it's a typo. And the reason was because the one account that DPL has currently with CEC is sisters. And so I talked to them after 3 tries, they keep writing into that. And so we said, when we sign the contract, we're going to scratch sisters and write in Stevens Ranch. Because when you read the body of it, it describes Stevens Ranch.
Well, yeah, the location.
27
is-
gas way.
It just, and for whatever reason,
That's how it plugged into their
yeah,
computers.
they send everything attention systems.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion regarding this?
I move to authorize the library director signing authority to execute the CEC contract for electrical services feeding the Stevens Ranch Library and the reimbursement of CEC fees paid by the Stevens Ranch developer in accordance with the PSA combined amount not to exceed $988,760.
I'll second it. I'll
Okay.
second it.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
But I still have a question here. The contract price is 179. Is this the contract we're signing?
That is the one that DPL was. Yes,
But it says it's 179,594.
That's included, if you look on the previous page, that's the current amount. That adds up to 988,760.
So we're not approving
the other 2 components, the 298, 107, and the 511, 415, are ones where the developer holds the contract and he pays CEC and we reimburse him. And it's because when you read their contract, if whoever signs the contract is responsible. to
Yeah,
build
no, I
all
see
the
you.
infrastructure.
Yeah, we're asking for reimbursement.
Yeah,
Fees paid by the developer.
Okay. So we'll Try the vote again. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Okay,
So the next one there is the Sisters of Lafine Early Learning Fabrication Process. And, you know, as we've been pushing forward on early learning components for Sisters of Lafine, we're having to go really fast through this process. And they put together a estimate. And I tried to summarize what was going on and kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier. That they developed an estimate for us with a high and a low range. And so the low range is well within almost 130,000 under our budget, and the high range was, I think, 45,000 over. So we're comfortable that they expecting it to come in our budget, and that's the budgets of Lapine, Sisters, and Sun River. Because when I set the budgets up, I made them all equal, but in reality, they're all slightly different. And so we'll be adjusting those. We need to be able to award their contract to go into fabrication in what's described in here as batches. And what it is in order to get it into production, get it fabricated and ready for Sister Lafine openings, we're going to do it in small chunks along the way for Sisters and Lafine. Sun River, because it's out there, we'll be able to bring that back to. And so we're asking for the sign-in authority up to the 508,000, which clearly covers everything at Sisters and Lafine. And like I said, we'll be doing those in chunks, and then we'll come back with Sun River and reconcile. This is really driven off of our need to be able to push fast through this piece and go through these. And so being able to come back to the board over the next month with 3 different awards, just not feasible. So we're asking for that authorization level, and then we'll go through the detailed budgets before our recommendation to Todd for execution.
any questions? Okay. Out of motion.
Authorize the library director signing authority to execute contract change orders with figure plant for the Sisters and Pine Libraries early learning fabrication costs in an amount not to exceed $508,500.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any questions? Discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
I,
Motion passes unanimously. Okay, now we're on to government agency fees.
So as we've been going through our agency fees, and this is fees being paid to the cities and to the county for planning reviews, plan check, permits and fees, you know, and there's a variety. I started realizing there's a lot of small ones that we're paying. Sisters and Lafine and Sun River, they're always within EC Todd's limit, right? But the collective balance on Redmond, well, as we paid individual invoices, it was, hey, it's still within Todd's limit, all of them. But the collective spending was pushing over that. And we thought, you know, this isn't something we talked to you about, and I hadn't really thought about it. I'd like to get presented up to you as we go through, because most of the time, the individual invoices will always be within its limit. When we get to Stevens Ranch, I would expect that actually it won't. The issue with city fees, most of the time you have to pay them right then. Like with plan check, it's like pay the fee and we will start. And then if you want your permit, pay the fee, then we'll give it to you. So we usually don't have the luxury of time to wait. Sometimes we try to process those. Robert will pay things when they're small on his credit card. To do it real quick and say, do online. And then when it needs a check, we run a check, but it's in that weekly check. So the request here is the authorization for Todd to be able to sign these things as we go forward up to the amounts of the budgets that we established for those fees. And that way he has that authorization level. That's why you can see, you know, when it comes to Stevens Ranch, they're big numbers. They're big fees. And so, but they're within our budget. We would monitor that and continue to report that. It just at the moment that we need them, it would be difficult. We would have a significant schedule impact if we all said, okay, we got to wait a month for them. So that's why I put it together. And that was the request. Questions about what I'm asking.
The town already has authority for up to 100,000. Do you expect any of these permit fees to exceed 150,000 individually?
When we get to Stevens Range, yes. I think on all the rest, it will only be in the collective. And so like with Redmond, we paid a whole bunch,
Right.
but at the end of the day, when you added up that whole bunch, it exceeded the 150. I thought, okay, that's something we should share. I talked to Todd about this, and then, so that you knew what was going on, because that's an expenditure that, so that you'd be aware of it. Definitely on Stevens Ranch when we pay because of its size, some of those, the SDC fees on that, which could be one payment, is estimated at like 5 million. That'll be a big number. It'll be based on what the city charges. So it's not a contract, it's a fee. It's not negotiable for the most part, right? Cities dictate their fees and their charges to you. But we wanted to make sure that at that point in time, we had that authorization.
Yeah, so essentially what we're saying is you have a $150,000 limit. Anything exceeding that, you have to come to the board anyway. So you just want to know that in the cumulative amount.
Right.
But I think we discussed that before, because if you have if you have a big purchase, you try to break it down. You know, less than 150,000 each. So that was for the purchase.
Right.
Here is for
Payment of
fees.
It was enough of a gray area. We just felt
I-
like, just to be totally clear, we bring it to you.
Yeah, I mean, I
But
think
we
it's
need a
just,
motion that you just, the understanding is that you're not going to be breaking down a $5 million fee into $150,000 parcels,
Oh,
right?
yes.
Because you already
Yeah.
know that, right?
that's one question, but the other question is, when you aggregate all these individual things and they exceed the $150,000 thing, it's just clarity to say that's okay, as long as it stays within the established budget. So, I mean, I think it's just a
The other-
safeguard for Todd.
Yeah.
And
I am asking on Stevens Ranch that if there's a fee of 250,000, that we can write that check and issue it without having to come back to the board or requesting special meetings. That would be the other option, is that every time we exceed the 150 and we need to process it. And this would be more, this is not going to happen to us for 6 months to a year when we are really into plan check and permitting Stevens Ranch, but that is, the others will be the cumulative issue.
Right.
Yeah.
Stevens Ranch would be like, you know, that Todd has authorization that we can, now the check, I believe, is still signed by a board member.
Right.
Before it goes out. And that's where it was, okay, it's not a contract, but we're actually paying a fee.
right.
And is Todd authorized to pay that? And so we're asking for that authorization.
But you will know before you go in for the submission of the fees, what the cost will be,
Actually,
roughly.
they will, so when you submit your plans, turn them in, And then they will return, here's the plan check fee. When you turn in the fee, we will start the review. And in Bend, it's been very slow. And so we try to turn that check around in like days. And my fear is if we're not right at a board meeting, we may end up having to delay for a month or so to the next board meeting to get an authorization to issue this payment of fees. And so that's where we would like to have that authorization. But when it comes to the building permit fees, you know, those are plan check. When it comes to the building permit fees, those, you know, they finish the plan check, they say, okay, you're approved, and they calculate the final permit fees. We get estimates before that, but they don't give us a final amount until after they're fully approved. And so then it's again, we're ready to pull the permit and go start work. But we need to be able to hand them a check. And that we could be in the same boat there. Where we wouldn't want to wait a long period of time to have a board meeting for that authorization. That's why on Stevens Ranch, it's the one that is going to be fixed. Have that type of meeting.
You're actually asking for an exception to our policy of $150,000 limit.
Yes.
I don't feel comfortable with that. We should have an exception just because of time constraint. It would be. Yeah, I don't feel comfortable with that.
Okay, anyone else have any thoughts?
Well, I guess I'm not really understanding. I don't understand why the Stevens Ranch. So can you go over that again? Why the Stevens Ranch amount is so humongous, so much larger than every other library?
Fees are based on the value of the building. So when you're talking about the renovation work on the branches, they're a $2 million to $3 million cost. Redmond is a valuation of $30 million. The Stevens Ranch, its valuation is at 80-some million. So the percentages, the amount of the fees is based on the building's valuation. There's a big difference between Redmond and Stevens Ranch because Redmond was an existing operating property. And that's why we saw the $500,000 savings in our fees there because we got credits for it. Stevens Ranch is a new property. The other is City of Bend's fee structure is much higher than the other cities. It's a bigger city, it has more facilities, and their fee structure is higher than the others. Now that's one little piece of it. It's the collective. The main thing is just the size of it and that it is new development. And that, like I said, out of that 7 million, 5 million of it is SDC charges. So that's money the city collects to includes the Park and Recs department, SDC, as well as City of Bend.
My concern is what I'm hearing you say is you would pay the fee, say 5 million, and then come back to the board for approval for that, having been done. And that I think does not fit with the policy we have of 150,000 and above being approval prior to the expenses. This would be, we're not going to tell Todd to pull back the check. I mean, it's saying we will pay no matter what once you write the check. And that's not how a board should really permit expenses to pay. Basically, Todd just needs to know that if we were to go ahead, we would not be looking at the cumulative costs. You're not breaking things down, like we said.
No, these
Stay with it.
individual invoices would be above Todd's limit.
Yeah.
But
I think if you know that we're going forward and the SDCs are going to be you can always make a motion and say, you can pay up to. And then you can put in the plans, the plan check comes back, and you have a ballpark figure.
Right, and that's
You
what
know,
this
that
is.
10%
It is.
onto that.
This is the up to number that we've estimated those fees at the 7 million number. It's a estimate based on
Right.
what we believe they.
What I heard you saying was, put it in, you want us to cut the check right then, so we can proceed. And then you'll come to us and say, this is done. Right,
That is correct. We would
so that's
write
the part I
check.
can't agree to, because you're coming to us after the fact. I think Todd fully knows that if you're going to go ahead and the fees are gonna be like 5 million. We're not gonna say they're like, no, let's bargain with the city, with Park and Recs, right, or city. There's none. These fees and permits are. We pay them or we don't. If we don't, we're dead.
Right.
So. Knowing that they're coming, we could just say at a board meeting, you know, next month, we're gonna be applying for these. There's gonna be an SDC charge. It's gonna be somewhere in the range of 5 million. We say, okay, we passed a resolution, so I can sign a check for 5.5 million. Up to, actually, that's the way we've done it in the past. We know certain costs. Not to exceed. And give you authority to do that.
Well, that's exactly what this resolution, or this motion is a not to exceed amount based on their estimates. It's giving him authority not to exceed the established budgets, and then he's got the amounts listed. So,
No, what Greg is saying is
Same.
they're gonna pay it.
right. It's
then
a
come
not,
back to
and
us.
so rather than do it individually, or this addresses the cumulative cost issue. So it assures Todd that he has authority to pay fees as they are come due. And then rather than do this for each set of fees, giving him not to exceed authority, it's a single motion.
Yes.
Can I just clarify, because I'm not understanding it the same way Ray is on the coming back to the board. It sounds like if we're saying up to this amount, that's the authorization there, not I'll pay 5 million and then come back.
So that means we bypass, this is gonna let you bypass.
No, we're just giving him authorization, just like we give him dollar amounts on any other authorization. We just gave him
Right.
authorization to do
Go up to a
sign
point.
in advance before we know the total amount. We do this all the time.
I do have a question again. I'm sorry, I apologize if I'm repeating or not, if Ray already addressed this, because unfortunately I can't really always hear Ray. So are you saying, Greg, that the 7 million for Stevens Ranch, this is an estimate? Or are you saying that it is most definitely going to be this $7 million?
It is an estimate at this point.
Okay.
But
Okay.
it's we believe it'll be around that amount. And this just sets a limit up to.
Right, I understand that. Does this, and another part of the question, is this also, because I know for Redmond, we've already paid for all the permits and everything. Is embedded in this cost some of those permits that we're going to be having to pay to the city of Bend?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thanks. All right, that helps me in making a decision.
To me, this is just like, we just passed this early fabrication thing, and I moved to authorize the library director signing authority to execute
Exactly,
this
exactly.
change orders for this purpose in an amount not to exceed 508,500. So this is
Right.
just saying we authorize Todd to pay the fees and permit charges up to this amount. If it's more than these amounts, then he will come back to us and say, this exceeds my signing authority. So if the estimates come in way higher, then he'll come back to us, or higher. And otherwise, we're saying when fees come due, you have authority to pay the fees.
And
Go ahead.
the Redmond amount, that isn't in, that is the Redmond amount that you have here, that doesn't include all the permit fees we've already paid to Redmond, correct?
That is what we already paid to Redmond.
There's kind of.
Oh,
two
it
things.
is what we already paid. Okay, all right.
It was a cumulative
Yeah.
thing where it's a lot of fees, but they were all separate invoices.
Yeah,
And it was after
Okay.
the fact that we realized, wait a minute, the collective impact is different than the individual invoice. And we thought we need to have this discussion holistically
Holistically,
about how we can manage this going forward efficiently, because you get multiple invoices out of cities for this kind of stuff. But Stevens Ranch, it could be that those individual invoices do exceed $150.
and as I'm hearing it, it sounds like the board is understanding that it makes sense that we're paying individual fees. It's not a workaround of the $150,000.
Right.
right,
So
right.
that's helpful for the work packages 2 through 4. And then the work package 1 is just going to be different just because.
The fees. are-
Yeah. And you say it's 150,000, but this would be like, you know, for the resolution we just made for paying for the materials for shelving. You know, if we had said without it there, we had prior last month said, you can go ahead and spend this money. And then you went ahead and did that. And this month we're saying, oh, this is what it costs.
No, well, it's still
Because
not.
we would have known, one is, when you're purchasing a piece of equipment or a product. This is non-negotiable. Basically, we pay the city whatever they say they want to charge.
Right.
So you have to put in the plans. They'll take it, look at it. Come back to you and say, okay, this is what it's going to cost you for us to proceed to the work on the plan. Right. At that point, we could have, we can say to Todd, hey, we know it's, you can tell us it's going to be at least 500,000 for the SDCs. Or 5 million, right? Whatever the number is, you come to us at this board meeting and say, we know this SDC is going to be this much. Will you give Todd the authority to check for not to exceed 5,500,000? Right. So we can do that, and it doesn't delay you.
Well, that's what I'm
Because
saying,
if-
that's
if
what
we're
I'm
doing-
asking.
We're all
today.
doing all this to speed the process only. We can pre-authorize him to do it, knowing what the cost is.
That's what he's
No,
asking.
this is asking for the entire amount of all fees.
Well, all of the
Right.
fees are non-negotiable, all of the, I mean, it's not like Todd has,
Or the
So
ballpark
I'm not
amount.
gonna write the checks today.
Right.
They're gonna be coming in, so we'll write the first check this month for our site plan application.
Which will be how much?
It's probably gonna be $30,000.
So there.
But what I'm saying, Ray, is this total 7.2 million for Stevens Range will be paid out in multiple invoices now and all the way till next spring, you know, over phase, because we're getting multiple permits and there's multiple plan checks. I'm just asking today to give Todd authorization to pay these fees as they come out from the city up to this amount. It's no different than asking you the same request in 6 months from now. It'd be the same number in 6 months. Unless anything we've already processed. That, I was trying to capture it all in one authorization. Because they're all city fees, it's not like a purchase or a contract. Payment of a fee, but it's a big fee, and so we wanted to establish the authorization level, so as these come in. The checks can be processed and issued.
Just for the board's clarification, it's a board preference decision, really.
Yeah.
It's, do you want each one as they come in that are over 150,000?
Over 150,
Or just knowing that they're gonna have these set fees, you wanna just deal with this right now, and that's really the decision.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, you know, we do have the 150,000. You know why it was said that way.
Yeah.
We should just follow the rules that we already have, not make exceptions to it for whatever reason. Anything over 150,000, under 150,000, you're gonna pay anyway, you have authority. Over 150,000, I think the board, fiduciary responsibility is at least review that, understand it, before we say, go ahead and cut the check forward. And that's, I mean, I don't wanna have a situation where you've got a check for $5 million to the city. And then we go like, okay, well, it's within the 7 million. But did we have a motion to say, yes, you can do that? And if we fall back on this motion, it's done.
Right,
I think expending this much money individually, it's the board's responsibility to say, yes, we do approve the $5 million rather than saying, oh, well, we gave you, $7 million to do with it. Pay the fees and permits. And we're done. We have to be on record, people saying, yes, we did actually approve this amount for this purpose. Rather than say, here's the blanket amount and you go ahead and divvy it up. That's not good. That's not demonstrating to the public that we're being careful with their funds.
well, what
I mean, we're not gonna
impact,
deny
what,
it, all right, but we
if-
have to be on record to do it.
if the fees are due and we have to pay the amount that the city is saying, how does that demonstrate any kind of oversight on our part? I mean, it's like if you don't support paying the fee, you're saying we're shutting down construction on this process, on this building.
No, that's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying is, we are gonna pay the fee,
Right,
but
so,
we should make it, when it's time to make $5 million expenditure, we better have the motion at the board level saying, yes, we approve the expenditures of the $5 million for an SDCP. This would allow the expenditure without that motion,
right,
because we're, right, I mean, so that to me is like, we can't really do that. I think Tom would agree, saying, well, the public wants to say, how did you spend this money?
and you look like you have
Well,
some.
but just reading the motion, it said that we're giving authority to approve payment of governmental planning, plan check, permit, SDC inspection. And I guess I have a question on miscellaneous fees. But it does spell out exactly
What
what
kind of fees?
what the fees would be. Or what we would cover. I guess I would want to know what miscellaneous,
Right.
I mean, to me, that's a little bit ambiguous. The rest are pretty, yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes it's, and how they name a fee, especially in planning reviews.
Okay,
Most of the time they follow these nomenclatures,
right.
but
They might.
they have some fees where it's just, it's a name I can't describe it here of how they name them.
Yeah.
But those are the bulk of what they. And so,
I guess what I would do is, I would entertain a motion and then we can discuss the motion and vote. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Well, I don't have the wording in front of me, so that Todd usually writes. I mean, I'll make an attempt on it.
You might
it-
read,
Todd can read the motion.
and if that fits your needs, then. So the sample motion I put was, I move to authorize the library director signing authority to approve the payment of governmental planning, plan check, permit, SDC, inspection, and miscellaneous
Yeah.
fees for the bond program projects in a collective amount not to exceed the established budget as listed below. Work package 1, Stevens Ranch Library, $7,281,272. Work package 2, Downtown Bend, $600,000. Work package 3, Redmond Library, $567,893. Work package 4, Citrus, La Pine, Sun River, and East Bend Libraries, $235,000.
Okay, I so move. Can I say that?
Is there a second?
I'll say.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. As far as discussion goes, and I think we have been discussing, but I favor this motion because it clarifies the question of cumulative fees per work package, which I think is important to clarify. And I think it addresses the fact that we don't have control over these fees, so we are going to have to pay the amounts. It's not like Todd has leeway in what the fees will be. So it's just a matter of paying bills as they become due. And I think the third thing is expediency, because as Greg has said many times, time is money in construction, and given our difficulty in scheduling board work sessions, board meetings, I can anticipate a fee becoming due and not being able to get the board together in a timely manner, and this just simplifies that process. These fees are an established part of the construction process. They're in line with what the board has laid out as its plan to build these buildings, and they're non-negotiable. So I don't see any reason not to do this. I think the not to exceed the established budget gives us oversight, and I think this saves us from having to do these each by each. So I'm in favor of this motion. Do I have-
And I agree with what Ann just said. That was exactly my thinking as well. Mostly the expediency of it. We don't have any control over what the fees are going to be. I don't know about anybody else, but the Stevens Ranch one most definitely I was struggling with, but in listening to Greg, I now have a much better understanding of why Bend is charging, they have higher fees. I can accept that. And so that's basically why I support this.
Any other comments or questions?
Well, I do think, we are going over the $150,000 limit that we proposed, but this does give us some leeway, and in that $7 million does. Number.
It should be face.
It's a little scary number in a way. So I think moving forward for me, I would really like to know, what the plan check fee was, just moving forward, just to see how that fits into that $7 million figure. So.
And I can say that, as we move forward, we're always checking these estimates. We're always asking the city for estimates of fees of what they're expecting. And each month I'll try and put in my monthly report, what's happening, so that you are aware that it doesn't get all the way to the end and all of a sudden you hear about it. I will commit to making sure that I'm reporting on this.
Right.
This gives us the expediency, but I will make sure that I keep you fully informed.
Okay, thank you.
And I actually find this list really helpful to know what the fees are going to be all in one place.
Exactly.
So it provides me with good information.
Well, that's my point exactly. You already know well ahead of time that we're coming up to a point that there's going to be a permanent fee or SBC fees. You're informing the board of that, keeping yourself up to date on that. At which point you would decide, you and Todd would decide, okay, we have at this board meeting, we should make a motion to pay the SDC fees, not to exceed a certain amount, giving you a leeway. This is what we've always done. We know the cost is coming. You know it very well because you're going along. You just said that. You can always ask us, request of us, the meeting before, and say, we're going to be putting these in, this is what we estimate it's going to cost, because I mean, you've got it down to the dollar. You know what these are going to be. Then you ask and say, Todd has the authority to sign a check for this. This is our normal policy. Plus, then we have oversight. The board has actually told Todd, we are responsible for having you sign the check. Not that you signed the check, and based upon this resolution, oh, the fee actually came out to be $6 million. Or whatever, right? Because of unforeseen changes. Expediency, you already know well ahead of time what the ballpark figure is going to be. I don't see that we want to say, here's your lump sum of money, and go ahead and pay it for expediency. You're so well versed on this. You're following the costs and the development plans so precisely. You know, so we don't need to go against or make an exception to our policy. It's there. I think that the responsibility lies with the board to approve the expenditure, especially, $5 million, whatever.
Okay.
You're still going to do it. I mean, you're still going to get what you want in terms of paying the Tom's fine. I don't see why we need to do this.
I think I would be coming back asking for the same authorization.
Right.
This simplifies that process and makes sure that when these come up, we can get them paid time.
But
I don't think it'll change what you're authorizing.
But you'll know beforehand how much the check's going to be, and we authorize him to spend that, plus up to the limit.
It would just be the same estimate asking for the same thing in 6 months from now than today.
And that's my point. I don't feel comfortable authorizing it 6 months into the future. When the time comes, we should authorize the expenditures. This is like saying, well, we think the Stevens Ranch Library will cost us, what, 38 million, 138 million. So we authorize you today to spend up to $138 million in construction fees. And then you come and tell us, well, we've done this and done this. This is to expedite the process. That's not right. It's just not the right way to operate the board.
I think.
You'll
we
still get it
understand.
done.
I already know.
Yeah, I think we understand your point, Greg.
I agree.
I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Okay, next up is library staffing. Jennifer?
Okay, this came out of a question we had at a recent board meeting about our turnover rates. And it also, which is good timing because it fits in with the monitoring report that is up this month. So let me bring up your,
We have a clicker.
I do.
Is that it?
I do, but I also have no data ports left to use it.
Oh,
If you can point to me, I'll click for you.
okay, you'll be my clicker.
Yes, and let me just. Here. Oops, sorry. Okay. And Cynthia, are you still hearing us?
Yes, I can hear it. Can you hear me?
Thank you. I just got a notice that Zoom ended, but apparently it didn't. Okay,
All right, well, thank you again for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm just gonna sit from here just so that my audio works a little bit better than if I were up front. So anyway, I am gonna run through some slides today on our staff turnover for 2022. I'm choosing to do an entire year because I think that gives the better picture of kind of what trends and things look like. And of course, 2023 is still young, and so we don't quite know what that picture is going to look like. I gave a similar presentation about a year ago. I'm happy to report that things are a little bit more subtle this year, just kind of the COVID issue dying down and a few other factors. So we'll go ahead and start. Todd, if you want to lead off. So I thought maybe we should just begin with some fundamentals, which is what is an employee turnover rate? So here's the definition from Workable, and it's just the percentage of employees who leave an organization during a defined period of time. And it includes voluntary resignations, dismissals, non-certifications, which is a fancy way of saying somebody didn't meet their probationary period. Retirements, we may include that in a calculation. So it doesn't include internal movement, promotions, lateral transfers. And it's something that we as HR professionals actually use in part of our tool chest to kind of gauge certain areas of effectiveness within the organization. So on the next slide, I've got some math. In case you were wondering, the advanced calculus that goes into this process, I presented it here for you. Yes. So we do use an actual metric calculation. We do not, however, have to go into any kind of fancy calculation to determine this number. It's a pretty basic calculation. So next slide. So again, I'm going to talk about turnover for this past year. And then I'm going to break out this slide in subsequent slides. Excuse me. So in 2022, we had 18 employees that voluntarily departed DPL. And now math, folks, we have about 100 employees, so it's really easy to do your calculations. So we had an 18.2% calculated turnover rate. Just giving you a basis of comparison. I go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics for a lot of the comparison data that I use in my area. BLS's last full year reporting cycle was 2021. And in that year, the national turnover rate was 47.2%. So that's just there for interest. All of our separations this past year were voluntary. Excuse me. And also right now we're maintaining a fairly consistent head count of about 100 people. This breaks out to 94 full-time equivalencies or FTEs. So that's just some human resources lingo. And what that means is while we may have 100 individuals, their collective time worked equates to 94 full-time staff. So we in our organization, we have full-time, and then we have 32-hour 4.8 FTE, and then 24-hour 0.6 FTE. So that combined math results in 94 FTEs. And then we had 19 employees who were hired at DPL in 2022, just so we can kind of see what the other looks like. So here's how that breaks out a little bit. This was kind of fun because we started getting into some interesting details. So as I mentioned earlier, 18 employees terminated their employment with DPL in 2022. We had 1 retirement and 7 voluntary exits. And then I broke it out for you all by full-time equivalency so that you could see what that looks like. And then also then I broke it out on this other side by month. So you can kind of see where we have peaks and valleys in that turnover period. Just rather interestingly and anecdotally, prior to kind of the COVID period, we often saw, I just thought it was interesting that we often saw our turnover like after the school year ended. So starting in that June period and then in through July and then August, and things kind of tapered off a little bit in September. So that was our terms by month for 2022. And then down here, we've added number of terms by tenure. And again, terms is just a HR lingo. It just, for purposes of this presentation, is also refers to separations. So you'll see that we had our highest rate of turnover within the first year, kind of sloughs off a little bit and then picks up in that 3 to 5 years. And then it goes way down beginning in year 5. This pretty much trends with just about every kind of turnover. This is not unusual. So we're kind of this when we're looking at kind of organizational life cycle and trending and staffing. This we're kind of right in the midst of something that's pretty average. So you really do, if this were kind of a bell curve, you really see that if a person is going to stay with an organization for 5 years, they're going to stay for quite, a long time. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. So I thought you might like to see more math.
Always.
So we've taken a look at this by percentage by month. So I gave you an aggregate annual percentage of 18.2. So if you break it out by month as a percentage, that top section shows you kind of where the highest percentages of turnover were. And again, that's in January and again in May. And then I also added our new hire incoming folks by month. And that shows that we had our highest onboarding in February and July. And also what I love, 18.2% hiring, so they match. So we didn't do that on purpose, but it just worked out that way for this last year. Next slide, please. So this is kind of the next couple of slides just kind of give some demographic information. So as you can see down below the pie chart, this breaks out by title. And so really we had the majority of our folks who voluntarily left the organization held the role of public services specialist. Next slide, please. Let's see, separations by location. Again, this is just kind of shows you where on the pie chart everybody exited from. And again, not surprising if you look at population, even those locations that makes sense. Okay, next slide, please. So HR does have an interaction with folks when they leave the organization, and kind of finding out, we do exit surveys and, we find out, why folks are leaving and whatnot. So really the top stated reasons for separation, and sometimes there's more than one, but the top reason was simply stated personal reasons. So life happens, folks get married, folks have transfers and family or need to take care of loved ones. Other stated top reasons for separation: opportunity for more schedule flexibility, opportunity for more job growth opportunity, and maybe seeking more compensation and or hours of work. So one of the areas that, again, my group looks at is how to retain our talent, right? And so this is the non-exhaustive list of some of the retention strategies, and I know there's more, but this is just sort of at a high level. As you all know, because I was here talking about this last year when we were working through our union contract, one of the things that I brought before the board was this concept of a shift differential, which was for folks that were bringing in really necessary niche skill sets. We had implemented an additional differential above base salary. We also now in the contract, we have what's called a collar on the cost of living adjustments. So A collar is a minimum maximum, so minimum 3%, maximum 5%. Again, I think last year we discussed the fact that we unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, but maybe more on my end, unfortunately, live in a place where it's the high cost of living is really hard on workforce planning and development. We've tried to place some major emphasis on staff education and skill development. So we have a very long-standing partnership with COCC. We are very fortunate to be part of a group called Public Sector Partners, and that's comprised of HR, human resources and employment professionals that work in partnership with each other and COC to offer public sector employees career and educational opportunities at COCC. And that has been a very great program. We also internally, several of you have, or you've all probably met Sarah Rang, our learning and development professional, that we also offer some internal soft skill development, goal setting, interview training. We also do some internal career coaching support. So if somebody wants to, interview for a position, but they feel like maybe they need to brush up on some skills or how they come across, we actually work through some mock interviews. We kind of help out with certain things that maybe they have some questions on where their next career step might be. So we have worked with folks to kind of help crystallize some of their goal setting and thinking in terms of what they want their next steps to be. We, as a district, have made a commitment for an ongoing focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion work. That work we see as ongoing and vital to creating a good retention strategy for the organization. And also, and again, this is sort of a, really that reemergence from our COVID virtual online workspaces as we come together again in person, really resuming our committee work and looking at places where we can give folks voices and input opportunities so that folks feel that they're part of this greater mission of the organization.
Jennifer, do we still, I know we used to pay for the tuition if you were going through the higher degree NLIS. Do we still do that?
We're still doing that as of this year.
I'd say we are shifting that to broaden out to the entire staff to do career education. So that's not limited to just one specific degree.
Oh, good.
So trying to broaden opportunities for everybody that wants to do education is going to help.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a proposal coming in through this upcoming fiscal year. Is going to broaden.
I work with.
Good, you'll see it on the budget next month. All right.
Okay, I think that's it. Any questions for me?
Well, I had questions, but you answered them all as we went along, so great job.
Yeah, I just wanted to, first of all, Jennifer, I wanted to thank you for moving closer so I could actually hear. So that was a great thing. I just wanted to ask you, on the turnover of staff, you said that that's kind of reflective of what's going on. Are you referring to it's reflective of what's happening in the state of Oregon or the country as a large? With the turnover?
I'm struggling to remember what I may have said. Was it related to the top reasons individuals were leaving the organization?
It might have been.
It wasn't the reasons. It was the slide that you talked about just prior to that. It just said, it was the percentage of people who had left the organization. It was the graph that showed the number of people who, or the percentage of people who were had chosen to leave the organization for various reasons.
There you go. Sorry, Zoom blitzed out on us here.
Okay.
Yeah, she's still there.
Oh, can you not hear me?
Yeah, we
We can
can
hear you.
Yeah, I'm not gonna bring it back up because I think that's expression.
I'm sorry, Cynthia, I'm drawing a blank on.
It's okay. It wasn't that important, Jennifer. It was just something I was personally wondering about.
Yes.
I think that, yeah, that was excellent.
Don't leave.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the monitoring report we're about to launch. This
Yes.
monitoring report, compensation and benefits. Some of these are pretty straightforward. One that I can't change my own compensation. And the board votes on that annually. That we can't guarantee employment and permanent employment, which, as I talk about here, we don't. But the really important one is number 4, that we will not fail to maintain appropriate levels of compensation and benefits sufficient to attract and retain employees. This is one where in the past, we would actually go and do a study about once every 3 or 4 years. And there have been so many changes, both locally and nationally, especially with cost of living increases, that we have changed that now. And maybe you can just talk a little bit about how we're doing.
Sure, thanks, Todd. So again, I'll take you back a year ago. When I came to you and had this discussion, I was full of surprise because we had done an external market study. We had an outside compensation review. We've been doing them as we had been advised to do them and discovered that the market had outpaced a handful of our positions, if you remember. And so we made those adjustments and in so doing have elected now to do that market study annually. So that those, I don't know about you all, I don't like surprise, and that was a surprise. So we went ahead and started that annual process this winter, where we did do an external market review with a compensation consultant. I have better news to share, and that is that we are in a much better place just in terms of comparable, being comparable with the market. And again, we've got those two terms, comparable, which means we are matching or meeting the market. And then you've got competitive, which is kind of a different discussion altogether. Really want to be comparable. In an ideal, we'd love to be competitive as well. We also have to look at, we are not a Google or some, so to speak. So, but the outcome, I think, is that we feel like our decision to move that to an annual process and the results were good, and they were, I think the findings in keeping with the, you just stated. Okay.
And then the last one is just about personal services, and I say here we are in compliance with that. So that's my interpretation of this report, is that we are in compliance with the compensation and benefits policy. Question.
Any questions for Todd or Jennifer on this? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Hope that we are in compliance with our policy on compensation benefits.
Okay, then a second.
I'll second.
Okay,
It's always been difficult to be competitive with certain IT. Or there is. It's getting harder and harder.
It probably depends on the day. When Facebook lays off 20,000 people and all other IT places are doing something, and that shifts.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
the market is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
So, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I,
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. That's fascinating, and especially the granularity of that. I mean, yeah, so, thank you. Okay, so we have an agenda item here on East Bend Library Services. We had our budget analysis from Robert last month and asked for any additional questions or information on how people were feeling, and I don't know whether Todd got any.
Well, I guess if you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Based on that, we got some, based on his presentation, unfortunately, we got some press about the East Bend Library closing. I am really, this is a request for me to discuss this, to put some clarity around East Bend, because that's having an impact on our staff who are fielding questions. They have public who are hearing what they're hearing, whether it's said or not, is that we're closing it immediately. And so concerns are coming to the staff, and I'd like to be able to give them some level, with some level of confidence, some direction. I will, since we haven't really had a chance to discuss this, I would like to tell you my opinion. Here's a few things that we're looking at is, one, we have the East Bend lease. We're committed through December 31st, 2025. That it happens to be right when Stevens Branch is due to open. Some realities are that when Stevens Branch opens, we will be shutting down this building, the Downtown Bend Library, for remodel. A recommendation I would have is, if you shut down East Bend at that time, that would be a real impact on not just the library, but on the community as well. And so that is actually an important asset for us in this process. The other piece is we have talked with the landlords out there. They're open to shorter term leases. So if we wanted to go to a 1 or 2 year term lease after this one ends, that availability is there for us. And then the last piece is, a lot of the challenge around East Bend is, how do we know what people want? And that's a really difficult one to answer because as you've all seen, we've gotten people with various opinions about what it means to them. One thing to factor in for the board is, at the point that we finish Downtown Bend and we have Stevens Branch, we will know a lot of concrete information about East Bend. And that is, people will vote with their feet. And I can't tell you what they're going to do. That may mean they're going to do all their library services at Stevens Branch or Downtown Bend, or they'll continue using East Bend at the same level. At which point the board will have decisions to make. But those are just some factors that I would like to put out there, because really, I just want to get some sense from the board, and really you have until December 31st, 2025 to make some real decisions. But I would like to be able to at least be informed when I talk to the public about what's going to happen, or about what direction the board is looking at. So that's kind of my request here. It's really kind of a request for some feedback to me, so that when I'm talking with the staff, I can give them some assurances, or I can give them some realities of what they need.
So we have two questions here as far as what's going to happen with that building. Not only the lease question, but also how much money do we want to put into that facility?
Well,
do you want to talk about that today, or
Well,
just
that-
gives people sense?
That one, yes, thank you. That's a good point. That is the other piece that we've been kind of waiting on is, you see that Greg's reports, it's to be determined what's going to happen with East Bend. Really, again, we need some direction from the board as to which direction to go on that. What we talked about in the bond process is that we would do basically upgrades minimal upgrades to technology, incorporating some of the things we learned from its building projects. Based on the fact that one, it's our newest facility, it was built in 2011, it's in the best shape of any of the facilities. I would recommend, but I'm not directing, is that is something that we should look at for being able to come in there and make those upgrades, do the technology upgrades, do some maintenance in there, such as painting that needs to be done. And also looking at incorporating possibly some of the early learning pieces there. Whether we, especially wouldn't recommend a wholesale change to that building just based on the fact that we don't know what's going to happen. Even if we decide to keep it open, we don't know what level of use it will be. Some of the designs we had when we bumped the budget up to 2 million was based on its current level of usage. So those are just some pieces where that we can actually work on coming back with some recommendations about what that would look like, work with Greg about some recommendations about what some of those upgrades could look like. But really looking for some direction on that piece as well. One of the things that kind of drives that is we don't want to get to a situation where it's December 31st and we want to move forward with renovations of East Bend. But at the same time, we're renovating this building, and then we're shutting down 2 buildings at once. Because some of these upgrades we could do now, we can get that in schedule now, right after Sun River. So anyway, those are some pieces that I would like some feedback on, and just throw that out for you. Whatever level of feedback you have, whether it's we need more time, we need more information, that's fine. But some information for me so we can start doing some planning, or I can at least go back to staff.
Yeah, so, but.
I have a question. The bond does state that we will do some upgrades to East Bend. What is our obligation to the bond language to do that? I think.
Yeah, I think that some of the things that just outlined are pretty much in line with what we were talking about. We wanted to upgrade the technology, especially based on what we're doing with LaPine Sisters and Sun River about whatever improvements we have there. Definitely see upgrading technology in meeting rooms. That's going to be a big piece of all of our buildings, and there's no reason that East Bend wouldn't be along with that. What I don't want to see is, well, it's a personal thing, but I would like to see that we have parity across the district. If you go into one meeting room, it's similar.
Yeah, it
to what
isn't
we're
like
talking about.
the 4-step child.
Some of the things like would we replace all of our shelving? Again, that building is the newest building we have. It has pretty shelving in good shape. So.
Yeah, I think the supporting material for the bond basically talked about making it equivalent to what the other branches receive. And then I think where the waters got a little muddy was when the architects took a look at the space and said, oh, well, we could do all these other things as well. And so then we started.
And that kind of came in when we said, let's do more for the smaller building.
Right, and so, yeah, so all of that, but yeah, I mean, I think refreshing it so that the maintenance is taken care of, it's got equivalent things, it's got some early learning materials. Yeah, I think that's what the supporting materials. So, you want to, Cynthia, do you want to state what?
Yeah, I'd kind of like to weigh in on this subject. I have to admit, initially, when we first were looking, we thought we were going to be building on Roble Road. I felt very strongly that the East Bend had to stay open at that point in time. And then when it switched to Stevens Ranch location. I thought, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Why do you want to have two libraries so close together? So my thinking was, oh, we should shut that down. And then after we received all those comments that Todd sent us from the public, it made me sit down and really rethink and reevaluate what my feeling was about it. And in my reevaluation, I started thinking, are we kind of putting the cart before the horse here? We don't know what anything's going to look like until everything's in place. And so my thinking became, up until, I do not think that any decision should be made in closing East Bend until after everything's up and running. That means after downtown's completed. And I don't even think anything should be decided until a year after downtown's been completed, because I think that the staff needs to gather that information to make a decision. Is the East Bend Library still a viable location? Is it still a place where people want to go? And if that's the case, then most definitely it should be open. If, however, the use of the East Bend really starts to dwindle quite a bit because more people are going to the Stevens Ranch location, then that can all be looked at. So anyway, my feeling is at this point in time that East Bend should most definitely remain open. As far as the dollars spent, I know I was one of the people, I felt really strongly that we should try and put as much into the East Bend as we possibly could. Now I'm kind of feeling like whatever the staff, if the staff feels that there are certain things that need to be done so that we're making sure that the East Bend patrons are getting the services they need, then I think that's the dollar figure that we should be putting in there.
Okay, thank you. Ray?
Well, I think, the bond does say there's going to be an East Bend Library. Is to keep it open afterwards, and you're saying, and here people say, well, it depends upon the people use it or not. To what extent? So that's an open question, and there's no threshold as to say if there's so much percentage usage, then we do this. If there's not this percentage, do that. It still doesn't answer the question in my mind. But I think the thing is, we have to do a financial projection. We keep East Bend open. What is it going to look like? When Stevens Ranch opens, when all the other changes have been made, what's it going to cost us to run the entire system? And as Ann said before, then we should look at the costs by cost center, which is each library. What is it going to be? Let's project it out to 5 years. See what that is. I think that's going to make a very big difference in our decisions, how we decide. We're not going to be able to, at this point, make the staff feel comfortable. That's just the situation we've gotten ourselves in. So there's nothing we can do definitively to say, yes, East Bend's going to stay and you don't have to worry about the positions, or yes, it's going to definitely close within a certain time period and we'll look for other positions for you. We're not going to be able to answer that. Put ourselves in a position that we cannot do that. So I think we're in a quandary. I don't know that I have an answer that would get us out of it. Other than let's look to see. One thing we need to look at is what's the financial projection 5 years after everything's done? What are we expecting to cost us?
That's a good point, because that's with this all along the way, and as we do every year with budgeting, we have to take it as where we are at that point, which is the hard part. It's always been a hard part from when we opened in 2011 in East Bend to say, are we going to be there in 6 years? So in 2011, we weren't able to say, yes, we will be here in 2017. we will go through the 5 years of lease and we'll assess. We do that every 5 years. Yeah. Yes, and just to be clear, that the staff are not coming to with concerns about, well, I have a job. They're just trying to answer to the public, are we gonna be open next month?
We don't
And
know.
even that would be helpful from the board, just to say, yes, we're committed through the end of the lease.
Well, I think we're committed to the bond period at least.
That's helpful.
And we have to be, as you're saying, no, well, it's more than that. You're saying if this library closes, do we, it's really crazy to close East Bend, isn't it? 2 libraries closing, 2 major libraries in our system closing at the same time, and then the most used one closing at the same time. That's totally off the table. The question becomes, yeah, when this closes, we keep East Bend, but for how long? At what level? And then, as Cynthia was saying, well, we can't just wait a year to see what the traffic is, because it'll be all of downtown Bend traffic get pushed. When do we find that we actually come to the equilibrium between the two? I don't know. It's a quandary, and I don't have an answer, and I don't have a way to approach it.
No, but even that, this discussion helps, and just saying, I'm not comfortable right now going out to the public and saying, well, I think we should stay open through the end of the remodel at least, but.
You can't even say that.
Yeah. But with this discussion, it's nice to be able to say that's a factor that the board is definitely.
Well, I think everything you said to the public is we signed a 5-year lease, and that implies at least till the end of the lease. Question is, after the lease is over.
Right. And so that's what this discussion is about.
And you're totally right, there could be, we don't know.
We don't.
We haven't learned anything in the last 3 years about predicting the future. That some dramatic event could happen financially where we have to make a very definitive decision for us.
Right.
But it's helpful at least reassure people that we're okay.
And your thoughts?
I feel very comfortable for us continuing on through the end of the lease. I would kind of like to see if we could get a financial projection of what that will look like to keep East Bend through the closing of this library and its remodel, and then sometime after this opens back up, just.
And that's very easy to do. It's right in line with the projections that Robert shared with you.
Yeah,
Right.
Just showing, because there is an impact. Once all of the buildings are completed.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be a stress on the staffing.
Yeah.
So the second part of this question was feedback on, do you want us, working with Greg, to come back with a recommendation on what it could look like to do at least the minimal upgrades, updating it as we discussed. I hate saying minimal, but do the upgrades that kind of bring it in and par with our other projects.
That would be helpful.
I think so.
To know what could be, I wouldn't say minimal,
Yeah, exactly.
Just
all right? What do we need to do to really make East Bend full service? Right? Do we put enough technology in there to have hybrid meetings? Right? Do we move walls or things around to actually make it so that it's more flexible? Things like that. Everything we would do if this were a permanent library. If we weren't leasing it, if this was ours, what would we do to provide the full services that we want for the public?
So that's what you're recommending that they pursue.
We should look at it. We should treat East Bend. In the bond, we said there's an East Bend library. People have looked at that and said it doesn't say it's going to close.
Yeah, to be specific in the explanatory statement, we said the East Bend Library, the newest and only leased building in the district, would receive minor upgrades to bring infrastructure up to the standards of the other libraries.
Mhm. That could be flexibility. Because that's what we're building into them. It may not be a minor cost.
Well, and so I think that's what we would look at, is coming back with a recommendation, and that would give you something to balance your discussion. So we hope.
Okay, so. Is that, you said pretty much what you want to
Right,
say?
I think looking at the technology upgrades, the meeting room.
Yeah.
Upgrades too, yeah.
Because we had a conceptual plan and budgets to do an extensive renovation.
Okay.
A renovation consistent with the others. This would be looking at it and say, okay, if we're not gonna do an extensive renovation, which is close it, move everything out and remodel like we're doing now.
Yeah.
This would be back to what Todd said there is, let's look at those key components, technology being one of the biggest ones. And then is there anything else in the facility that needs to be freshened up, replaced, or changed? And what does that look like? What's that scope look like? And that we can, walk through with DPL and Millwork and talk about what is that and how does that relate to the budget?
Right, so we have an actual proposal.
Yeah,
I would think we go with the mindset that if we had to move everything out to accomplish what we want to do, then that's okay, but we don't build into saying we will move everything out, close it down, revamp the entire inside. It's like saying, this is what it would look like at the end. How we get there. That's another discussion, because that depends on are we actually going to do it. This is wish list.
So, okay, so my take on this situation is like what Cynthia said, essentially, that I've always felt like service in East Bend was important. And I think the board has always shown a commitment to having service in East Bend. And I agree that we don't know how these new facilities are going to affect service countywide, really. I mean, it's like, it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. So I'd rather make the decision based on data and usage and what we see and give it some time to level out. So what I like what Cynthia said, for at least a year after downtown is open, and to just keep an eye on it and to see how trends are going. Because we don't know. So because it's a leased facility, I would not favor the extensive renovation that Miller Hall originally proposed. I think that's way too, and given the uncertainty in what the future looks like. But to bring it up to standards, do what we've been talking about. I wouldn't necessarily get into the wall moving business and things like that, because I mean, originally their plan was expensive and extensive, and it's a leased facility. So let's wait and see, but bring it up to standard and then let usage determine our future decisions.
yeah, I think if we could go back to Miller Hall and have them work with us on basically creating a new conceptual scope of this is what we need to do.
Right.
And it's gonna be fairly high level. And look at that and look at what kind of budget that is and go through that with you guys. I think the timing of doing that, it would work out well to do it after Sun River, which Sun River reopens next spring. So I don't think we would even want to try and go in there until well after that. So that it occurs while Stevens Ranch is being open. All of the other branches, I would almost even wait till after Redmond is done before doing it. Maybe not, but because it finishes in summer next year. and then maybe do it in the fall. This could likely be a shorter term to do this. But to get it completely done and whatever we do, before we get to the end of Stevens Ranch.
Right.
At the end, opening up that new library and shutting this one down and going into construction here is going to be a very large amount of work for staff as well as our whole team. So I think that'd be my initial thoughts, and I think I'll put that schedule into that same analysis. So what is the scope, what's the cost, and what would be a good schedule to do this work? And hopefully it's making it efficient for the project team and staff.
Okay. Does that give you?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
that
thank
gives
you.
you the information. you
Right,
got.
yeah.
Okay, well, that was a good discussion. I mean, I think some clarity around this is good, and it has all kinds of ramifications. for
Yes.
timing and budgets.
I do think we should plan it. It's gonna take a few months because of the workload.
Yes.
Before we come back to you.
Yeah,
With this, and that way. We wanted. No. It's
No,
not
and I-
urgent, but and that way we'll spend a good quality time on evaluating it. Before that, so
Right.
it'll be late summer, fall, I think, realistic, because I know what they have on their deliverables over the next.
right. It's gonna fold into this program, so.
You
Okay,
can always consider this as everything has been done, then we could, the last one would be easy. Not. Last one being down. This. There's,
And then
you have,
could be
a lot of flexibility and we start, we've got 20 years for the bond. Right. There's no rush for anything. It's just that Todd has to live with the anxieties. But that's what he does.
it's the public, no, Todd. Okay, library news.
Just Oregon Library Association meeting here in town next week. You know, we've got a few board members attending, so. Nice to have that honor since they don't come very often. Also, this is our 20th year of a novel idea, so we're doing a lot of programming around that already. Just some really exciting, innovative programming. I got to meet the Mexican consulate for Portland in our event last Saturday, and which was really great. It was a book about the history of Hispanics in Oregon going back to the 1500s, and it was a great turnout at the East Bend Library. Majority of people were non-native English speakers, and so it was really nice. They felt very welcome. The presenters felt very honored to be able to be here, which I thought was funny because I was honored that they were here.
Yeah.
But it was just a great thing that our staff does. It's just a microcosm of how they turn some part of one of these books into something you never think about. So it should be a pretty exciting event this year. All four authors coming. Should be fun. And get out your library cards. I know you have one because I found it on the floor today.
Oh, geez.
With your library card, you can get in free to the Deschutes Historical Museum all month. And they have a neat exhibit on the history of mountain bikes, and also, if you go upstairs, a history of 20 years of a novel idea.
Yeah, it's really got some great memorabilia up there, and there are just some really great memories from past programs, and they had a novel idea kickoff exhibit opening a week ago Friday night, I think. And it was super well attended, and people were just really excited. And that, I mean, it just really highlights what great partners the Historical Society is. And they fit this exhibit in while they were trying to do this other major exhibit. They were pretty frazzled, but both exhibits are fantastic. So I'd encourage
A lot of great quilts and, what's really neat is the quilters did quilts for the Anne Griffith book right when COVID hit, so nobody ever got to see them.
Nobody got to see it.
And they're there, so it's
Yeah.
kind of fun to see quilts that nobody's seen.
Yeah. No, it was great. It was a very fun. So, and tickets for the authors will be appearing on April 29th. Saturday night at Bend High. And free tickets are available online if you go to the foundation website. So I'm really excited to see what the team has put together this year. It's gonna be outstanding. And the other great aspect of this is I think all of the authors are staying on for other programs. So they're doing writing exhibitions. David James Duncan is doing one on how his writing process. So there's a lot of good supplementary chances to see these authors as well. So I think it's gonna be really great. So that's what I've got. We now have an executive session. Okay, with that, I'm going to end the executive session and call the regular session back into session.
Okay.
All right. Critical communication. Are there items of critical communication that Todd needs to be communicating? I would say the East Bend discussion is high on the list, just so the staff has some clarity around that. And again, notifying the public that none of the buildings are closing, since that seems to be an ongoing issue over the last 3 years, as people are still confused based on what is. So, yeah, anything else that people can think of?
No, I agree about these.
I think that people really need to know that. Okay, self-review of meeting. Cynthia?
Yeah, okay, so, oh, I am off, okay. Yeah, it was a good meeting. We certainly did cover a lot. Anyway, there were some challenging conversations around finances. Greg, I really appreciate you again as taking the time to really make sure that we understand, because there's a lot of complicated stuff we're discussing now. And I read your reports and everything, but when I'm done, I still have questions. So I appreciate your presentations, but also answering all of our questions. And I really appreciated Jennifer's presentation. So anyway, good meeting.
Okay, Ray?
No, I reiterate what Cynthia just said. Long meeting.
Got a lot of work to do, man.
I'll just echo good meeting. Greg, again, I really appreciate the clarification that you give us on, what's happened with all the projects. I initially get my first look at the packet, I'm a little bit overwhelmed, but your clarification.
Yeah, I would agree completely. It's helpful. I think it's helpful. You're really good at presenting the information in different ways. So even just that summary of the fees that we will be paying is great. I mean, it's good to have it in one place. It's good to know what the extension of the utilities is going to cost. I mean, it's very helpful. And I, since I'm the one that asked for the pictures, I appreciate those too. And I read this all on paper, so I'll go back and look at the drone footage as well.
Like the PDF. Make sure
Yeah.
there should be active links there.
Yeah, no, that's great, because I mean, we're not out there with boots on the
Yeah.
ground looking at what you're looking at. And I think it's really helpful because people are constantly asking
Yeah.
questions about what's going on, how far along are you, what are they doing, So I think it's good information for us as board members to have. So yeah, I thought it was a good meeting, and I'm really happy we got some clarity around East Bend. I think that was a good discussion. And I think making the decisions based on usage and data is important. We have an opportunity here to do that, so that's great. Todd, your analysis?
I'm really very good discussion around board responsibility and what that looks like. I think that was a really useful discussion for us. I really appreciate the clarity on East Bend. And I know they're not here right now, but the local contract review board did a great job. I always appreciate that. It was actually fortuitous for us that we actually had contract review board things to do at the same time, so. I think we only meet there once every couple of years, so it was great to see you.
Okay, with that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody.
See you in person next month.
Yes,
I see you.
I noticed the way you would. Wait.
Oh, it's-
Yeah. Move that. We'll have